era of football. Est video is purement para intratnamiento y no infringe derechos de autor. Los derechos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 851. 2 points left. For Teen Head fans, they are eager to see Fifen lose the game this round. If Fifen loses this game, Teen Head will only be 1 point behind them. Although they are still 1 point behind, they have narrowed the gap from 6 points to 1 point in just 2 rounds. This is enough to create huge pressure. Not to mention that Fifen's players are not particularly experienced. Even a team with rich experience will become panicked when they lose a 5-point advantage in 2 rounds. So, in the 31st round of the game, Teen Head fans first watched Teen Head defeat Ling Dong and temporarily narrowed the gap between them and Fifen to 1 point, and then began to pay close attention to the game between Fifen and Changfeng. Fifen had tied with Changfeng away from home before, and now they should have more advantages at home. After all, in the league, the home court has the advantage of choosing the map, but Teen Head players still hope that Changfeng can perform better. They have never expected Changfeng to win like today, and they have never paid so much attention to Changfeng's games like today, but they expect Changfeng to win. It's not that they haven't paid so much attention to Changfeng's games in the past, but they usually expect to see Changfeng lose. At the end of the first half of this game, the fans of Teen Head were very disappointed. If the score in the first half had appeared in the past 1 or 2 years, they would still be very happy, but now, it is not enough to make people happy. In the first half, Fifen, who was at home, played their home advantage to the fullest. After preparing the map for a week at home, they took the advantage in the first half and suppressed Fifen, and then successively achieved a 2-goal lead through Zheng Qi and Shinrao phase breakthroughs. Although 2 goals do not necessarily mean that they can definitely win the game, it is still a considerable advantage. So the fans of Teen Head could only turn off the live broadcast depressedly, and then reconfirm the truth: those guys in Changfeng are really annoying. However, when the second half was about to end, Teen Head's fans couldn't help but open the live broadcast channel again to see the result of the game. When they reopened the live broadcast channel, they couldn't help but cheer loudly when they saw the score. In the second half, Changfeng completed a big reversal in the game. Now there is not much time left before the end of the game, but the score has become 3-4, with the visiting team behind. Changfeng surpassed Fifen in the second half. After the initial discomfort, Changfeng became more and more courageous. Their rest and state were better than Fifen. The passivity in the first half was just because Fifen took the lead. After the second half, the advantage of the map gradually decreased, and the state of Fifen players began to decline gradually. After all, they have played 2 very difficult games in a row. Although they were in good shape at the beginning of the game, as their energy was consumed, they were gradually suppressed by Changfeng on the court. Although Changfeng's overall strength is a little weak now, the power they burst out in individual games is still very powerful. Fifen, who was in good form in that first half, only managed to draw at them after using all possible means on the road. Now, although they were at home, they were suppressed by Changfeng after using up a lot of Fifen. Faced with such a situation, Fifen certainly didn't want to lose. They launched a fierce attack at the last moment. Teen Head's fans began to pray, hoping that Changfeng could hold on to the end. Even if they couldn't hold on to the end, they should at least draw with Fifen. In any case, if Fifen couldn't win, it would be a joint victory for Teen Head and Changfeng. Their prayers seemed to have no effect. At the last moment of the game, Zheng Qi's forced breakthrough made the commentator scream wildly. The ball went in. Fifen tied the score. They saw hope again. Do they still have a chance to win? This game is very important to Fifen. The hearts of the Teen Head fans were about to tighten. They didn't want to see disappointment at the last moment, especially when they saw Changfeng launched a violent attack after the restart. Why are you so impatient? Just drag the time away. A draw will also be fine. Many Teen Head fans cursed like this, but what they didn't know was that for Changfeng, they would not be satisfied with a draw. What they wanted was the final victory. So even if it might give Fifen a chance to overtake at the last moment, they had to keep attacking and keep fighting for victory. There is no doubt that this is an extremely admirable approach. Although Changfeng still failed to win in the end, they did not make any mistakes in the attack. Before the whistle sounded at the end of the game, they kept attacking and firmly suppressed Fifen. "You are really strong even at old age," Zheng Qi couldn't help but say to Lu Xiaoshan after the game. In the second half, it was under the leadership of Lu Xiaoshan that Changfeng's offensive lineup thoroughly demonstrated its level and continuously broke through Fifen's defense. Because of the reason that his attention had to be attracted by Lu Xiaoshan, Fifan had many loopholes in other places. At this time, Daxing showed his level. His continuous assaults helped Tin He score goals continuously. You suffered such a loss last season. Haven't you learned the lesson this season? Lu Xiaoshan replied. Not really, it's still a bit powerless. Zheng Qi sighed. Fortunately, at least we didn't lose. There is not much difference between a draw and a loss. It's just the difference between 1 point and 2 points. It's nothing more than that. You can't encounter even one draw again. Tin He is now only 6 goals behind you in goal difference. They will perform better in this regard next time. Lu Xiaoshan replied. Of course there is a difference, at least we have maintained the possibility of winning the championship without losing. Zheng Qi laughed. Lu Xiaoshan was stunned. From this perspective, there is indeed a difference. It is not just the difference of 1 more point. Whether or not a team wins the championship undefeated is also a big difference. You have to know that in the history of the Chinese top league for more than 80 years, except for the first 10 years when everyone was exploring, there were a few teams that were extremely strong. After the entire league began to stabilize, the number of teams that could win the championship undefeated in the season was very small. It took almost 10 years for such a team to emerge. The results of Chengqing and Tin He in recent years can be said to be very good, but they have never won the championship undefeated. After all, when competing against each other, they have to beware of the open and secret attacks of other teams, and of course mistakes are easy to occur. If Fifan can really win the championship undefeated this year, then the value and significance will truly exceed the meaning of a league championship, and it will appear to be more valuable. Good idea. Lu Xiaoshan could only nod his head. From this perspective, there is really a huge difference between tying the score in this game and losing the game. At this time, the fans of Tin He had already turned off the live broadcast channel with satisfaction. Although they felt a little regretful that Fifan did not lose the game, at least they only got 1 point, which made Tin He only 2 points behind Fifan. With Tin He's current momentum, it is only a matter of time before they surpass Fifan in goal difference. In this way, Tin He can quietly wait for Fifan to make mistakes. 2 games, 2 draws, I am very satisfied with the team's performance. Zheng Qi said at the press conference after the game. In these 2 games, Fifan's players did perform very tenaciously, but after all, they only got 2 points. The 6-point advantage has become only 2 points. This is a situation that will change in 1 game. In this case, does Captain Zheng Qi have anything to say? A reporter asked in the audience. Nothing to say, I have already said it just now, we are all very satisfied, after all, we are still 2 points ahead. Zheng Qi laughed. Compared with before, it is no longer stable, the reporter wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Zhu Shan. It's normal for us to slow down our pace occasionally. We are still 2 points ahead now, and that's our advantage. 7 games and a 2-point lead is enough. We will win the league championship, said Zhu Shan. Reporters didn't quite believe Zhu Shan's words, because Zhu Shan didn't give any reasonable reasons, and seemed to be just being stubborn and talking nonsense. Of course, just being stubborn and talking nonsense can't convince others. But they can't say anything now, after all, Fifan is still 2 points ahead now, and in the next schedule, they don't need to face the top 4 teams anymore, and there are not many strong teams among the opponents, mainly relegation teams. Although these teams are difficult to play, they are no longer the teams that have the strength to compete with Fifan. As long as Fifan doesn't make any mistakes next, they will be able to maintain the 2-point advantage until the end of the season. If they can really avoid making mistakes, then we have nothing to say. All we have to do is win all the remaining 7 games. We have already completed half of the 14-game winning streak, and now we have to complete the other half. Li Qing said lightly in the team meeting. For him, he no longer needs to consider Fifan's situation. All he has to do is win 1 game after another, and try to win a few more goals in each game, surpass Fifan in goal difference, and then quietly wait for Fifan to make a mistake. Tin He really doesn't need to think too much now. All they have to do is to do their best. The more stable they perform, the greater the pressure they will create on Fifan. Psychologically, Tin He is the most mature now, and only they can use this method to continuously put pressure on Fifan. Chapter 852. The outburst of the substitute players. The 2-point lead is actually very subtle. Let me describe it in a very vulgar way. If you were a fan of Fifan, what would you think when you see the 2-point lead? Optimistic, you would think, we are still 2 points ahead. Pessimistic, you would think, we are only 2 points ahead. However, whether it is pessimistic or optimistic, it will not change the reality. The reality is that Fifan is indeed 2 points ahead in the standings. At the same time, they are 7 points ahead of the third-place Changfen. With 7 rounds left in the league, they can at least ignore Changfen for the time being. The next 7 opponents are Xiu, Nangguo, Mingfen, Liahou, Lingdong, Jianmang and Yushen. Among these 7 opponents, we should be most wary of Nangguo. Their performance this year is not very good, but they are a top team after all, with a good foundation. Moreover, although they have no desire, they don't mind performing well against us to prove that they're still a strong team. From this point of view, they are more terrifying than other teams. Xiu, Lingdong and Jianmang are mid-level teams and they also have no desire, but their overall strength is outstanding like Nangguo. Liahou, Mingfen and Yushan are relegation teams. They have fighting spirit, but they're a little worse as a whole. We have to defeat all these 7 opponents and show our best form in every game. In the first 2 games, we paid the price of points and went through the 2 most difficult games. Now, it's our turn to perform better. After all, we needed to get out of the fatigue before, and now, we have completely come out. This is what Zheng Qi said to other players in the Fifan team. In fact, in the first 2 games, Fifan played very hard and to a very dangerous point, especially in the game against Corning. When they were 2 goals behind in the first half, Fifan was closest to losing. If it weren't for the explosion of several core players, they couldn't keep the draw. If they lost that game, with only a 3-point lead, Fifan's performance in this game would definitely be under greater pressure. 3 points and 4 points, it seems that there is only 1 point difference, but you have to know that 4 points is the safety line at the round of games. With a 4-point advantage, even if you lose this round of games, you can at least lead the opponent by 1 point. 3 points is different, the difference between the 2 is huge. In this game against Changfen, Fifan actually still has some home advantage. They rested and recovered well, otherwise they wouldn't be ahead of Changfen. Although under Changfen's fierce counter-attack, Fifan finally failed to keep the victory, but from beginning to end, they were not in a very dangerous situation. These 2 rounds were their most dangerous time, but they used their previous points advantage to hold on. In the following time, they can make good adjustments to meet the competition in a better state. We must win the next 2 rounds of the league, understand? Only by winning these 2 games can we meet the semi-finals of the China Cup in the best state. Now no team has a heavier task than us, but such a heavy task proves that we are on a glorious road. I know everyone is very tired, but at this time, we need to show our level and grit our teeth and stick to it. Zheng Qi waved his fist and shouted at the team meeting, and the extraordinary players also waved their fists one by one to echo him. The reason is very simple. Every extraordinary player knows that no matter how tired they are, they can't be more tired than the 4 core players in the team. Especially in the 3 games that just passed, the 4 core players can be said to have overdrawn and showed their level. Whether it is Zheng Qi, Shen Ruofei, Liu Shibo or Bin Xiaoqiang, the level they showed can be said to be extremely outstanding, and even showed a level that is better than theirs. It was their outstanding performance and overdraft performance that allowed Fifan to eliminate Tianhe and Taikanning and Changfen, achieving the best result in such a schedule. Such performance is not something that ordinary teams can do. It was because of their outstanding performance that Fifan had such a performance, and now it is time for them to repay these core players. In the next game, we will perform better, and you can be a little more relaxed in the game. Against those opponents, maybe our performance is still a little worse, but against the mid-level teams, our performance is enough. Zheng Qi said to Zheng Qi. Huh, really? Zheng Qi replied. Damn, do you underestimate us? Zheng Qi said. No, if that's the case, we will have a good rest in the next game. Zheng Qi said. Brothers, do you have confidence? Zheng Qi turned around and asked. Of course I have confidence. Fifan's players answered in unison, with great momentum. At this time, they are fully confident that they can help Fifan win in the next game. Zheng Qi and Shen Ruofei, Liu Shibo and Bin Xiaoqiang looked at each other. Okay, then I'll leave it to you. We can take a break. After seeing the others nodded slightly, Zheng Qi laughed. Fifan's next opponent is Xiu. In the next week, they can recover their form very well. After deciding to hand over the next game to other teammates, Zheng Qi and his team simply only conduct restorative training every day, and do not practice tactics together, in order to better recover their physical fitness and form. This is of course a very risky behavior, but if they can rest better, they can achieve better results when playing against Nangguo. This is also the reason why Zheng Qi agreed to Zheng Qi's proposal. Xiu is still slightly weaker in the final analysis. Although they are a very distinctive team in the league and can often overturn strong teams, it is based on the fact that they have always had an outstanding god-level player. Meteor Sword Daixing has been the top player of Xingyu in the past few years, but this year he transferred to Fifan, which also made Xingyu lose their magic. In the past games, they still won the games they should have won, but they were no longer able to upset strong teams. After all, the departure of such a god-level player is almost a loss that Xingyu can't make up for now. To deal with such a team, Fifan, even without the support of these god-level players, is still confident to fight Xingyu with the support of Zheng Qi, Niao, Su Jin, Zheng Qi and others. Moreover, Xingyu would not have thought that Zheng Qi and the other four would not work hard in this game. No team would ignore Zheng Qi and the others in the game with Fifan, just like when the second half of the league started. Although Zheng Qi was in a very bad state, every opponent did not dare to relax their defense against him. The core is the core. Fifan now has 4 cores. Just paying attention to them, the opponents are already a little busy. Who knows, in such a game, their core still came out to shake, but it was just a shake, and nothing else. Regardless of the key offensive and defensive methods, Fifan relies on other players. On offense, Liga Rui, Wang Yuanfen, Zheng Qi and others charge forward, Su Jin, Niao, Zheng Qi coordinate and direct from behind, and Zheng Qi, Lin Fei, Zheng Qi and others dispatch and guide back and forth. On defense, in addition to the players on the field trying their best to play, they also rely on the personal defensive abilities of Fuladi, Zhuyi and others to constantly interfere with the opponent's offense, while other defenders unite to block Xingyu's offense. If facing a stronger team, such as Nangro, Qixinfen, and Shenhua, which are not ranked very well now but have sufficient strength, or teams such as Kangning, Tianlong, and Hongyuan, which are now ranked second only to the top 3, Fifan's seemingly strong but actually weak nature will be discovered by the opponent as soon as they fight, but they are facing only Xingyu. As mentioned before, Xingyu was originally a very distinctive team, but after Daixing left, they lacked a backbone. Although the other players were all strong, the departure of such a core player not only affected their results, but most importantly, when facing strong teams, they were naturally in a dilemma of a gap in realm. This can be seen from their record. When facing the middle and lower teams this season, Xingyu's winning rate was not affected much, but only slightly decreased. When facing the top 8 teams, their performance was much worse than before. In the past, Xingyu could more or less win many games against the top 8 teams. After all, they were not far from the top 8. However, what about this year? They lost all the games against the top 8 teams. The impact of an outstanding core player leaving can be seen. Therefore, the players of Xingyu suffered a great loss in the entire first half. Most of their attention was on Zheng Qi and others, while other extraordinary players continued to launch attacks. In terms of individual strength, they are even better than the Fifan players other than Zheng Qi, but they are all professional players. They have to concentrate and be distracted at the same time, which makes a big difference. In the first half, when Zheng Qi and the other 4 did not play well, Fifan scored 4 goals. Xingyu only recovered 1 point through a tenacious attack, which put them at an absolute disadvantage in terms of the score. The outstanding performance of the other Fifan players in this game can be said to have surprised everyone else. After all, even though everyone knows that the Fifan players have good attributes, the truly outstanding ones are nothing more than the 4 core players, plus 5 or 6 guys whose level is slightly higher than the first-line players in the top league. The others are actually at their level in terms of operation level. And in the first half, their performance was really outstanding. Chapter 853. Differences. Damn, these guys actually let Zheng Qi and the other core players rest on the court, and they were able to lead us by 3 goals with their performance. Although in the first half of the game, the players of Xingyu seemed very confused and could not detect Fifan's intentions and ideas, but after returning to the locker room, they discussed it briefly and reviewed the situation in the first half, and they immediately came to the correct conclusion. It's not that they're extremely smart, but everyone knows Fifan's current situation. It is normal to use this method to let the main players rest, but Xingyu didn't expect Fifan to be so bold before. You have to know that Xingyu is also a veteran team. Although they are not a veteran strong team and have only been a mid-level team in the past 10 years, they also have a very long history and a very high status in the league. Otherwise, they would not be able to train a god-level player like Daixing, and at the same time keep him in the team for so many years. In fact, in the league, teams that can cultivate god-level players themselves, rather than poaching them from other teams, have such a long history and overall level. Therefore, even if the god-level players of such teams are poached, their own foundation is enough to allow them to stand firm in the league. Xingyu is such a team. The opposite example is Thunder. Thunder's foundation is not so outstanding. Although they had god-level players like Ben Shikai at the time, strictly speaking, Ben Shikai was not cultivated by them. Zheng Qi was just a product of Thunder's youth training. The difference between the two is still very large. Without a few years of wandering outside, there would be no Zheng Qi now. Although the performance of teams like Xingyu has declined a lot this year, their foundation is still there. Although the god-level player Xing has left, they still have a group of players who were as tenacious as cockroaches. In the first half, they fell behind 1-4. If they were a team with no foundation, they might be discouraged. After all, losing a game would not have much impact on them. At the same time, being fooled by the opponent is also a very frustrating thing. However, the players of Xingyu were not frustrated. They began to discuss constantly, wanting to give the other team a good show in the second half. Even if we are going to lose this game, we can't lose it easily. They should let the four core players have a good rest. In this way, we will have a certain advantage in strength in the second half. Zhu Bo, the former deputy of Xing and now the captain of Xingyu, said to his teammates, "Well, except for Zheng Qi and the other four guys, Fifen's other players are just high in attributes, not particularly outstanding. If we fight well, we will have a chance to win with 3 goals behind." The current deputy captain Zheng Qi nodded immediately. The atmosphere in Xingyu's team has always been fine. Zhu Bo and Zheng Qi are also veterans of Xingyu, and they have great prestige in the team. Moreover, to put it bluntly, Xingyu has nothing to pursue in terms of results now. There is no chance of a good ranking, and relegation is impossible. Of course, we have to show our value more in the game to keep the fans' hopes and expectations. With such thoughts, the atmosphere of Xingyu's players immediately became very enthusiastic. Let's see if Zheng Qi and his team can play in the second half. Actually, if they do, it won't be a big problem. I don't believe they can concentrate in the second half after the way they rested in the first half. If they can do that, it means that their minds are always hanging and they won't rest well. So I don't think they will do that. We still have to deal with the remaining few difficult guys of Fifen, Zheng Nioliwa, Su Jin, Zheng Hai, Ban Yuanfen, and Li Grui. The others are not as good as they used to be. Zhu Bo continued. Lin Fei and Zheng Qi were not bad either. Zheng Qi reminded him. It's okay. They don't have the ability to make a decisive move, so it's not a big problem. Zhu Bo said. Zheng Qi nodded. That's it. Fight with them and gradually get the score back. Even if we can't win, we have to scare those guys and see if they dare to play such tricks in the future. Zhu Bo waved his fist and said loudly. The players of Xingyu waved their fists one after another. Their emotions were not affected by the first half. But at this moment in Fifen's locker room, they seemed to underestimate the enemy. We performed well in the first half, Xingyu should not have much power to fight back. Li Grui laughed. Boss, you can rest better in the second half, watch us win this game, and conserve your energy to deal with Namguo. Zheng Qi nodded. That makes sense, but you have to pay attention, Xingyu's group is all Xiaokang, they will not give up the game easily, and the 3-goal advantage is not very big. If you think you can win the game casually, then you'll definitely suffer in the second half. Don't worry, we will not underestimate any opponent, don't you think so? Zheng Qi turned to ask Fifen's other players. That's right. Fifen's players answered one after another. Then we will have a good rest. Shinrao Fei nodded, he also felt that there should be no problem. After all, in the game of football era, although big scores are easy to appear, generally speaking, there'll not be many goals. The advantage of 3 goals is indeed very large. And Zheng Qi reminded that Fifen's other players would not relax at all, so he was more relieved. Liu Shibo and Bin Shikai had nothing to worry about. Liu Shibo's way of commanding the defense was very tiring, and Bin Shikai was not young anymore. Being able to take a break at this time would be of great help to their next sprint. As for the Fifen players, they really would not take it lightly in the second half of the game. If they had rushed from the Yamato League to the First-Class League, and then from the First-Class League to the Super League, they might have thought that professional games were also easy to play, but after last year's game, they basically learned a big lesson and knew that even if they had the attributes of a god-level player, it did not mean that they could beat ordinary Super League players. In this case, if there were no outstanding players to lead them, their attribute advantages would not be brought into play at all. So now the Fifen players who stayed behind were basically willing to be screws, and Fifen at least had players who could lead them. Now that the 4 god-level players are not on the field, they also have people who can lead them. With a cautious mood, Fifen started the second half of the game. After the second half started, Zheng Qi and others sat on the bench. None of the 4 god-level players played. This made Fifen's fans a little disappointed. After all, many times, watching a game is to watch the performances of top stars. If they don't play, what's the point? However, the fans understand that FIFA needs to play too many games now. It is normal to let the main players take a break when leading by 3 goals. When seeing this scene, Zheng Qi began to feel that their judgment was not wrong. In the second half, there may be a chance to catch up. Even if it can't be caught up, at least it can scare the opponent. This mentality is of course very wretched, but for the midstream team, this mentality can allow them to perform better on the court and have no worries. Zheng Qi launched an attack from the beginning of the second half. Although Zheng was missing, Zheng Qi had been playing like this season. Led by Zubo and Femji, they continued to attack, suppress FIFA's defensor, and then looked for opportunities. After a wave of forced attacks, they quickly talked through FIFA's defensor and scored 1 point. Seeing that the score had become 2-4, FIFA's fans didn't care much. After all, in such a game, a score change of 1 or 2 goals was too normal. FIFA's players also thought it was normal. They just quickly began to prepare for a counter-attack. Focus and resist their attack. This defensor is very important. If we can withstand their attack and score another goal, they will start to panic. Zubo said in the team channel. Zheng Qi's players knocked at one after another. This was also a normal thing. For a team, when they were leading by 3 goals, they only led by 1 goal not long after the second half. Even if they would launch an attack next, their mentality would be greatly affected. Theoretically, they just failed in one attack, which can't be regarded as a huge change in the situation. However, from 4-1 to 4-3, such a huge change is enough to make any team's mentality fluctuate. What's more, several core players of FIFA are off the court. Without the leadership of these core players, will their mentality be so stable? The thoughts of Zheng Qi were indeed correct. When FIFA launched the attack next, although there was no problem with their state, facing the sudden outbreak of tenacious defense by Zheng Qi, their attack still encountered a lot of obstacles. Damn, these guys suddenly became tough. After an unsuccessful attack, Liga Rui retreated in embarrassment and complained. It's not that they became tough, but because they don't need to be distracted by Zheng Qi and others. Zheng Qi answered calmly. Indeed, although Zheng Qi and others didn't shoot much in the first half, as long as they were on the court, they would attract a lot of attention from the opponent. In other words, Zheng Qi basically didn't use all his strength to resist FIFA's attack, so Liga Rui and others would certainly find it much easier to attack. And now, Zheng Qi and his team were off the court, and FIFA's current offenser was facing Zheng Qi's focused defensor. Such a difference would of course be immediately reflected in the defense line. Chapter 854. A great opportunity. Don't worry. You know, this is also a good opportunity for us to train. Without Zheng Qi and others, how can we show a better level on the field? This is also very important for the future. Zheng Qi said in the team channel. Zheng Qi and others were not on the field, so Zheng Qi naturally became the core and tactical commander on the field. He was very good in this aspect. His words made FIFA's players quiet down. Indeed, compared with the usual games, there was not much difference at this time. It was nothing more than that FIFA used to be centered around Zheng Qi and others, but now it has been replaced by Zheng Qi, Nioliwa, Sujin, Zhai, Liga Rui, Wang and Fan. These people are the core. FIFA's personnel matching was originally very reasonable. There were 4 god-level players, followed by 7 or 8 main players whose level was above that of ordinary Super League players. The others were substitutes whose level was slightly lower than that of ordinary Super League players, but whose attributes were excellent. This matching allowed them to form a sufficiently excellent overall advantage on the field when they were matched. Of course, the current situation is a special one. The core players are not on the court, so the whole team has to rely on Zheng Qi and his main players to drive the team. FIFA's main players have their own strengths. Zheng Qi and Nioliwa are good at long-distance skill bombing, Sujin and Lin Fei are auxiliary players, Liga Rui and Wang Yuanfen are good at raids, Zheng Qi and Zhai can do anything and can connect the front court. In terms of configuration, even if the 4 core players are not there, their offensive and defensive lineup is complete. After Zheng Qi reminded them, FIFA's players were more patient when attacking. Seeing FIFA become more stable in attack, Zheng Qi and others on the sidelines nodded in agreement. After more than a season of growth, FIFA now finally looks like a mature team. Even without these core players on the court, they can at least play to their level normally without any psychological fluctuations. Of course, playing to their level normally does not mean that they will definitely score goals. There are many differences between the offensive football era and classical football, but there is one thing in common: That is, in the game, you can't score a goal just because you perform well. In many cases, scoring a goal still depends on luck. Fifan's luck is not very good. After 7 or 8 minutes of serious attack, Fifan still failed to score a goal, but Zheng Qi seized the opportunity to complete a beautiful interception and lost possession of the ball. Return to defensa, don't be impatient. Under the command of Zheng Qi, Fifan's players began to return to defensa quickly. It is normal to lose possession of the ball, just don't let the opponent counter-attack and score a goal. They quickly set up a defense line in their own half. Such a quick action made Zheng Qi sigh. Return to defensa quickly, it seems that there is nothing to use. In the next attack, we must score a goal and attack head-on. Zubo said decisively in the team channel. Since there is no place to use, we need to use a more violent attack to tear open the opponent's defensa. Zubo is also an experienced professional player. The judgment he made at this time is undoubtedly correct. Fifan's players have good attributes and a complete overall configuration, but compared to the top teams, without the 4 core players, the level they can play on the field is indeed a little weak. At least compared to veteran teams like Zheng Qi, they are a little weak. Although even if they're weak, their weaknesses are limited. At the professional level, such differences have no substantial impact, but the side with the advantage in strength can play more patiently. The 4 core players cannot play, and Fifan's impact on defensa is actually greater, although there is only one defensive player among the core players, Zubo. After all, Zheng Qi and others do not play. Zheng Qi and Li Guru's offenses are very distinctive, and their offenses still have certain threats. When Zubo does not play, Fifan can only rely more on his personal ability to defend. Although their personal defensive abilities are good, everyone knows that if the defensa can still play a good effect by relying on individuals, then relying on individuals when defending will only reveal huge flaws. Last year, Fifan's defensa was a weakness because there was no player like Zubo who could organize the back line. This year, this defect was made up. After he did not play, Fifan's back line could still form an overall defense like when he was there, but it was inevitable that there would be a rigid scene in operation, which made it easier for the opponent to find a flaw. Zheng Qi's players are basically old hands. Although they also have some newcomers, most of the players have sufficient experience. They quickly seized the defect that Fifan's back line can defend from the front, but the center of gravity of movement and switching defensa is not stable. After 3 or 4 consecutive frontal pressures, they quickly changed the focus of the attack, and then seized the opportunity to tear open Fifan's defensa and get back another point. A beautiful goal, Zheng Qi tied the score to 3-4. They were only 1 goal behind Fifan. After the start of the second half, Zheng Qi showed an extremely strong momentum and kept scoring goals. Now less than 20 minutes have passed in the second half, and they are only 1 goal behind Fifan. Fifan is now beginning to run into some trouble. If Zheng Qi and others don't play, perhaps they will watch this victory slip away from them. This is what Tinhe hopes to see. Tinhe's game will be played a little later. If Fifan is tied again or even loses, it will have a huge encouraging effect on Tinhe. The commentator exclaimed. After all, at the end of the first half, he also felt that the overall outcome of this game was already decided. Even though Fifan had drawn 2 games in a row before, it was because of the continuous battles and the fact that the opponent was really good. Who could expect Zheng Qi, who was of average level, to make the whole game a replay after falling behind by 3 goals? Old teams are old teams. The next game will depend on you. Zheng Qi sighed on the bench, and then said something in the team channel. He had no intention of playing. Not only him, but also Shen Ruofei, Liu Shibo and Bin Shikai had no intention of playing. When they said rest, they had completely relaxed their minds. Even if they played at this time, it would not have any effect, and they would lose the opportunity to rest. At this time, the players on the Fifan field had to play their own level better, instead of expecting Zheng Qi and his team to play and turn the tide. They should show their value now. In fact, the Fifan players on the field did not show any idea of letting Zheng Qi and his team play to stabilize the situation at this moment. Although Zheng Qi and his team were the core and the most trustworthy players, after collectively making the decision to let Zheng Qi and his team take a good rest in this round, they just wanted to rely on their own strength to win the game. Although Zheng Qi and his team did not play anything on the field, they had indirectly helped them gain enough lead in the first half. If they still could not win the game, they would feel that they were not worthy of being a professional player. Although we are only leading by 1 goal now, aren't we still in the lead? We didn't have good luck and didn't play well before, but we can make up for it. In the next attack, we must score a goal. Zheng Qi was commanding in the team channel. This game was actually quite stressful for him. The extraordinary on-the-spot command was done by Zheng Qi before. When Zheng Qi was not around, Zheng Qi was in charge. From a certain perspective, the command level of the two of them was similar, and Zheng Qi was even better in details because he was more meticulous. But now that Zheng Qi was not around, Zheng Qi realized that if he wanted to take on the on-the-spot tactical command completely, the difficulty would be much greater. This situation did not occur because Zheng Qi's command ability was not outstanding. In fact, Zheng Qi was even better in the perception of small details and some specific tactical abilities. However, the team Zheng Qi was commanding was a little worse than usual. After losing the 4 core players, some tactics that could play a huge role in normal times were now not so useful. This is also a matter of course. When you fight in peacetime, you have a main force that can break through all defenses. Of course, it is easier for you to break through the opponent's defense. Now that this main force is gone, if you want to break through the opponent's defense, you have to put in more effort than usual. Even because of the lack of the main force that can fight the hardest battles, you can't break through the opponent's defense. This is not a shameful thing. After all, tactics also have their limits. No matter how good the tactics are, a weak army can't defeat the most powerful team in the world head-on. At least it must be stronger than the opponent in some aspects for the tactics to work. Now the lineup on the fifth field is certainly not that bad, but it also makes Zheng Qi feel a little troubled. However, Zheng Qi also knows that this is also a kind of training for his command ability. How to tear open the opponent's defense when the team is weak and get the victory he wants is the ability that a tactical master needs to have. Zheng Qi has actually been learning from Li Qing's. Li Qing's is such a player. When the strength is similar or slightly at a disadvantage, he can make up for the gap through exquisite tactical arrangements. This is the key for him to compete with Lu Xiaoshan as a supporting player. Zheng Qi has been learning this, and now, it is also a good opportunity for him. Chapter 855. Confidence. What is a tactic? A tactic is a method of launching an attack when you have an advantage, avoiding the opponent's advantage, and hitting the opponent's weakness. This is the definition of a successful tactic. As a person with a very high IQ, Zheng Qi's understanding of tactics is quite profound, so after realizing that a frontal attack could not tear through the opponent's defense, he immediately began to think of other ways. The reason why his tactical thinking is outstanding in specific tactics is because he has amazing calculation ability. After all, he is a mathematician. The attributes, characteristics, level, and operation ability of the players on both sides will naturally be refined into specific data in his mind. Although such data will not be absolutely correct, in general, they are not much different. If he glances at which players from both sides are in a certain area, he can roughly see how many seconds it will take to gain an advantage if an attack is launched, during which period, which players from both sides will be around to support, and how long it will take. This kind of calculation ability is basically impossible for other players to learn, and it is also Zheng Qi's most outstanding point. The reason why there were some mistakes before was because Zheng Qi and others were not there, which caused some deviations in his calculations. Now Zheng Qi has become accustomed to the current situation on the field, so his performance immediately became much better. Zheng Qi and others were not on the field, which really brought a lot of trouble to Fufenza. Without Shen Ruofei, the ability to break through from the front was much worse. Without Zheng Qi and Bin Shikai, some fleeting flaws of the opponent would easily slip away from them. However, Zheng Qi quickly found a new method. Zheng Qi's frontal breakthrough alone certainly could not create such great pressure, but at the same time, what if Li Guru Yuanfeng launched an attack from the side? The effect of both sides working together would be almost the same. Without Zheng Qi and Bin Shikai, it would be impossible to catch those tiny flaws, so we would increase the intensity of the multifaceted attack and force the opponent to have more flaws. In this way, it would be easier for Lin Feinliao and others to seize the opportunity to expand their advantage. What's more, he has Zheng Hai as his assistant. Although Zheng Hai has been very low-key and silent since joining this year, he can always provide timely support when he is on the court, which can also make Zheng Qi play more boldly on the court. His command is more delicate. Zheng Qi turned to Shen Ruofei beside him and said, "He has a strong calculation ability, but he is a little worse in operation, and his specific reaction is a little worse, which makes him only a strategist, not a warrior." Shen Ruofei replied, "If he can really reach the level of Li Qing's, even if his reaction is a little worse, it doesn't matter." Zheng Qi laughed. "I hope he can reach that level after accumulating experience." Shen Ruofei nodded. "By then, he will be like Li Qing's, and you will be like Lu Xiaoshan, then our team will be invincible." Zheng Qi sighed. Back then, our ZY team was invincible. Shinryu Fei replied. This made Zheng Qi burst into laughter. On the court, Zheng Qi's brilliant tactical command finally made Fifan achieve a beautiful performance. After continuous command, Fifan began to attack from 3 directions at the same time. Although there were only 1 or 2 players in each direction, the simultaneous attack still made it very difficult for Zheng Qi to resist. After all, before launching the attack, Zheng Qi first blocked the opponent's side with a large-scale skill, and then launched the attack. Under such circumstances, Fifan's simultaneous attack immediately attracted the attention of most of the Zheng Qi players. Li Rui, who was deliberately left behind by Zheng Qi, launched an attack from an angle that the opponent did not expect. When he rushed over and attracted the attention of the remaining opponents, Niaolua's skills began to cover that area on a large scale. With the help of Niaolua's skills and Zheng Hai's timely response, Li Rui showed his power and killed 2 opponents in one breath. Zheng Qi's defense line suddenly had a big gap. Zheng Qi immediately issued an attack order, and the remaining Fifan players rushed forward and tore the gap open in the first time. Beautiful tactical command and keen sense. Zhu Shang couldn't help but praise him. Before he had time to command, Zheng Qi took the lead and made the correct command. This was not simple, he was on the sidelines and had a much clearer understanding of the overall situation. Under such a rapid attack, Fifan quickly scored a goal. They completely tore through the opponent's defense line and then sent the ball into Zheng Qi's goal. 5-3, Fifan once again expanded the lead to 2 goals. Okay, there is no problem with this game. Bin Shikai smiled. Although there was still about 20 minutes before the end of this game, with Bin Shikai's rich experience, he naturally saw that under such circumstances, it was not difficult for Fifan to win this game. With only 1 goal ahead, Fifan's situation was actually a bit delicate. After all, their mentality was most likely to be shaken at the time. However, at such a critical moment, Fifan's substitutes stabilized their positions very importantly, so that their own advantage could be maintained. At such a critical moment, stability is more important than anything else. Fifan stabilized at the time, and now they have expanded their lead again, which is equivalent to regaining the advantage they just lost. There is not much time left in the game, and it will be much easier for them to win this game. A player like Bin Shikai certainly does not only look at the current situation when watching the game, but also distinguishes the mentality of both sides. Maybe he can't see it so carefully when he is on the court, but he can see it more clearly when he is off the court. The judgment he made this time was also very correct. After expanding the score advantage to 2 goals again, Fifan's players began to treat this game more easily. In the next defensa, they kept disrupting Zheng Qi's attack. Zheng Qi was better than Fifan, but it was also limited. With a stable mentality, Fifan's players kept disrupting Zheng Qi's attack. Although they were at a disadvantage, they still held off the opponent's attack with the help of their players' defensive advantage of returning to the court faster. Zheng Qi was helpless with such a defensa. Fifan's defensa had many flaws now, but they began to adopt a clumsy man-to-man tactics, 1 against 1, leaving only 1 player as a reserve. It was not difficult to break such a defensa, but it took time to find an opportunity to kill several of them in one fell swoop, so the defensa would naturally have huge problems. In normal times, Zheng Qi could certainly attack patiently, but now they were 2 goals behind. If they attacked patiently, then there might not be much time left, but at this time, of course, they couldn't be anxious. They had to play steadily, and there was still a chance to equalize the score at the last moment. If they were impatient, then they might not even have such a chance. So they also began to attack more patiently, looking for opportunities little by little, and finally after 6 minutes, they seized the opportunity to fight a wave of annihilation, and then narrowed the score gap to 1 point again. It's a dying struggle, but if something goes wrong with us, they may really snatch a draw. Bin Shikai said on the bench. Zheng Qi nodded, but he didn't care much. The extraordinary players may lack experience, but their mentality is actually very mature. Ordinary players don't have extra ideas. They just need to surround a few core players. Zheng Qi is more familiar with Zheng Qi and the others. They may have their own weaknesses in terms of level, which prevents them from reaching the top level well, but in terms of mentality, there will be no problems. In such a situation, they can't make mistakes. They will lose some games because of their strength, but they will not lose some games that should not be lost because of their mentality. Zheng Qi is indeed very familiar with Zheng Qi, Niaolua and Zheng Hai. So maybe Bin Shikai will worry, but Zheng Qi will not worry. And his judgment is undoubtedly correct. Once again, they were only 1 goal ahead, and they were unable to stop the opponent's attack. This did not change the emotions of the Fifen players on the field. They still launched a counter-attack very calmly. This time, Fifen had all the main players except the 4 core players on the field. Originally, Liga Rui and Wang Yuanfen took turns to play, but now they played together, with 7 or 8 main players and 2 or 3 substitutes. When they attacked, Xing was shocked to find that they could not resist it. The attacking lineup of Liga Rui, Wang Yuanfen and Zheng Qi, with Lin Fei and Zheng Hai in the back, and the auxiliary lineup of Zheng Xu, Su Jing and Niu Liwa, plus Zhu Yi and Fu Lei's protection, Fifen's lineup was quite outstanding in attacking. But think about it, most of them have the level of top league players. Although they have some defects that prevent them from reaching a higher level, they have a tacit understanding with each other and the advantage of attribute points. If they really concentrate on playing the game, they will be better than the average top league players. Now that they were out like this, Xing, who lacked top players, could not resist immediately. After Fifen expanded the lead to 2 goals again, Xing knew that they really had no chance in this game. This thought also made them lose the game quickly. Chapter 856. The New Iron Triangle. After losing the game, Xing was a little depressed, but the outcome of the game was not very important to them, so even though they were depressed, Zubo and Fenji planned to say hello to Fifen's players and have a chat. As a result, they saw Zheng Qi walking into the stadium from outside and saying to Fifen's players, "Ah, you played well, I didn't expect you to win." Zheng Xu and the others didn't react much to this, because they knew that Zheng Qi would not say anything good, but Zubo and Fenji became even more depressed after hearing this. What does this mean? I didn't expect them to win, but they still won? Doesn't that mean we're very bad? So after hearing this, Zubo and Fenji didn't want to say anything to Zheng Qi anymore, but planned to turn around and leave. "Hey, 2 bosses, don't leave, let's talk more." Zheng Qi called them coquettishly from behind. Zubo turned around curiously, and then looked at Zheng Qi. He was quite familiar with Zheng Qi. Although Zheng Qi had only played in the top league for more than 1 season, the circle of professional players was only this big. The players of Xing were basically unrestrained in character, otherwise they would not be known as the indestructible cockroaches. They were like-minded with Zheng Qi, who was recognized as extremely wretched after only entering the top league for more than a year. As a result, he turned his head and took a look, and his nose was almost crooked with anger. Zheng Qi pointed at them with a smirk on his face. "Ha ha ha, we didn't even make a move, and you lost. You were really bad." Zubo immediately raised his middle finger to Zheng Qi. "Damn, if we hadn't been fooled by you in the first half, you 4 would have had the guts to not play in a serious game. Anyway, we've already played, and we won, ha 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 ha." Zheng Qi laughed, and didn't answer Zubo's words. "Wait, next time we meet you, we'll see how we kill you." Zubo said something harsh, and then he left the field with Fenji and others. However, he was not particularly angry, because Xing and his gang also liked to do this kind of thing in the game, saying that others were rookies after winning the game, so even if Zheng Qi did this to them, they were not very depressed. Moreover, Zubo also knew that the strength of Xing's players was not bad, but although they were all very strong and difficult to be defeated, they were also somewhat lacking in ambition. Now that Zheng Qi had stimulated them, if some of the young players in the team were stimulated and worked hard, maybe Xing would have a good prospect in the future. After the Xing players left the field, the Fifen players began to accept the cheers of the Fifen fans. They gained more than just 3 points in this game. The 4 core players got enough rest, which would definitely make them perform more easily in the next game. And with 1 more game, they were temporarily leading Team Head by 5 points, which also made the Fifen fans feel very happy. Although the 2-point lead is not safe, looking at the performance of our team, they are capable of maintaining this 2-point lead. The previous 2 rounds of no-wins would make people feel very worried, but now that they have started to win, the fans will immediately calm down. This is actually a very interesting manifestation of the league. Although the actual situation has not changed, even if it is only temporarily leading Team Head by 5 points, it is enough to give Fifen more confidence. The pressure at this time is on Team Head. After all, their opponent Jianmang in this round is not an easy team to deal with, and it is not easy to defeat them. However, Team Head, led by Li Qing's, performed again in this game. It's amazing. After the game between Team Head and Jianmang ended, Zheng Qi couldn't help but sigh. It's amazing because Team Head not only won the game under pressure, but also did another beautiful thing, winning a perfect victory. Before this game, the situation was like this: Fifen won 2 goals against Xing, leading Team Head by 5 points, and also expanded the advantage in goal difference to 8. In other words, if Team Head wants to continue to exert pressure, it is best to win a few more goals. Otherwise, if they only win by 1 goal, they will actually be further disadvantaged in goal difference by Fifan. The level of Jianmang team is quite good. They are in a similar situation to Xingyu this year. They also lost Yu Pen, a god-level player who has been the core for a long time. However, their performance is better than Xingyu. The reason is very simple. Xingyu lost their spearhead Daixing, while Jianmang lost Yu Pen, their front-court offensive lubricant. Although the two are similar in importance, and Yu Pen and Daixing are also of similar level, Jianmang's loss in direct threats is not very large. Their head coach is also an old man in the league. After Yu Pen left, he immediately adjusted the lineup to make Jianmang play more directly and fiercely. Such tactics will certainly make Jianmang's offensive appear too direct and lose a lot of room for change, but it plays well with Jianmang's current personnel composition. Therefore, since the beginning of this season, although Jianmang's performance has declined, it is not very bad. Facing such a team, it is not difficult to score against them, but it is more difficult to score more goals than them, or to prevent them from scoring. Jianmang is now ranked higher than Xingyu. They are also that kind of team that has no desires. With such a mentality, traditional teams like them can often perform better, because they have the self-esteem of a traditional team and will never give up the game easily. At the beginning of this game, Jianmang took the lead in scoring through a series of fierce attacks, and Tinhe's situation began to look very bad. However, under the command of Li Qing's, Tinhe quickly stabilized its position. They did not rush to launch a counter-attack, but constantly wore down Jianmang's fighting spirit and looked for better opportunities. This tactic is not difficult to think of. After all, Jianmang's tactics this season have been a bit of a head-on and a bout-on. Their attacks are fierce, but they're often just one breath. It will be much easier to deal with them after they lose their breath. However, knowing this truth does not mean that one can do it calmly. Tinhe is walking on a tightrope in every game that follows. Not only must they win, but they must also win more goals so that they can quietly wait for Fifan's mistakes. With such a mentality, it is simply impossible to remain so calm. However, under the leadership of Li Qing's, an absolutely calm brain, Tinhe calmed down. They used soft knives to constantly wear down Jianmang's fighting spirit, and even paid the price of not launching many attacks in the first half. This is a manifestation of self-confidence, proving that they are confident that after almost wearing down the opponent's fighting spirit and enduring the opponent's three-pronged attack, they can still score more goals. In such a situation, they can still maintain such confidence and calmness, which is enough to prove that Tinhe is indeed in the best state now. Tinhe, with such confidence and calmness, is of course a great enemy of Fifan. In fact, Fifan is confident that they can defeat them when facing them, but now they are in the league. The confrontation between each other is important, but the most important thing is still the ability of both sides to grab points. Tinhe's current ability to score points is indeed very fierce. They are the team that has performed the most steadily in the league in the past few years. The most stable means that in the games where Tinhe has the advantage, they will definitely win and will hardly lose points. Moreover, after Yu Pen joined the team this year, Tinhe's strength is better than before. Before the end of the first half, Tinhe seized an opportunity to tie the score. Li Qing's instigated, Yu Pen assisted, and Han Yiming scored. They are the new Iron Triangle, a very strong combination. Basically, except for Zheng Qi, other teams can hardly stop the joint attack of these guys. Liu Shibo couldn't help but say, "Well, their lineup is indeed very complete this year." Shin Fei nodded. And in the past few years, they have not lost any personnel. The 5 Tigers are still in the team. Even though Yu Gang and others have been gradually marginalized, they have not thought about leaving. Shin Fei's words were a little surprised. After all, even Cheng before would find it difficult to retain people under such circumstances. After all, honor is one thing, and the embodiment of one's own value is another. Maybe it's because they all admire Li Qing's. Li Qing's is a person with such charm, which is not quite the same as Lu Xiaoshan. Zheng Qi smiled and said, "And the situation of Cheng and Tinhe is different. The 5 Tigers of Tinhe are more because of Li Qing's. Their own strength may not be so outstanding." Shin Fei nodded silently. In fact, Cheng also had such a situation at the time. Many of the so-called 8 great kings were not worthy at their name, but those who were worthy at their name could hardly stand staying under the light of Lu Xiaoshan. This does not mean that Li Qing's prestige and status in the team are higher than Lu Xiaoshan's, but it is determined by the characteristics of both parties. Lu Xiaoshan must be the one who shines on the court, while Li Qing's can hide behind the scenes on the court. From this perspective, Lu Xiaoshan will unconsciously occupy more space for his teammates, while Li Qing's can provide more space for his teammates. If Li Qing's hadn't been a late bloomer, in a few years, Qin He might have had an overwhelming advantage over Cheng Fen. Zheng Qi said with some sighs. They are our competitors now, but this year, we still have the advantage. Bin Shikai muttered. Chapter 857. Simple right and wrong. For Zheng Qi and others, they knew that after tying the score before the end of the first half, Qin He's victory was only a matter of time. In this case, what can still be seen is how many goals Qin He can win in the second half and whether it can narrow the goal difference between Qin He and Fifan. Of course, they hope that Qin He can win less, but they are soon disappointed. In the first half, Qin He kept tracking Jian Mang, which made them a little exhausted physically and mentally. This made Jian Mang's performance after the start of the second half, compared with the first half, have a big gap. In the first half, they couldn't withstand Qin He's counter-attack, and they couldn't withstand it in the second half. In the second half of the game, Qin He scored 4 goals in a row and won a big victory of 5-1 again. This allowed them to narrow that goal difference between them and Fifan again. Now they are only 4 goals behind Fifan. There are still 6 rounds of league games, and 4 goals are not difficult to catch up. What's more, Fifan's next round will be against Nanglo, while Qin He will play against Yushen, which is deep in the relegation zone. With the level Qin He has shown now, it is not uncommon for them to win again. At this time, Qin He has already started their strongest impact and pursuit. Although it seems a little early, considering that Fifan still has to play in the China Cup, starting to catch up with the momentum at this time is undoubtedly also to build momentum, or to put pressure on Fifan. In such a chase, the pressure formed is of course very great. And Fifan's next game against Nanglo will definitely attract a lot of attention. There are certainly many highlights in this game. Nanglo will be Fifan's last opponent with enough weight. Among the next opponents, it is difficult for Fifan to have an opponent who can stop Fifan. In other words, if they win this game, Fifan will no longer face real challenges in the league. As long as they don't make mistakes themselves next, winning the league championship will be a sure thing. Of course, Qin He will not be easily shaken. They will definitely put pressure on Fifan. Even if it cannot affect their league performance, it will affect their cup performance. There are actually many places where Qin He can take advantage of now, don't worry about them. We will just win all the way. Zheng Qi said in the team meeting. This is nonsense, but it is also a truth. That's right, no matter what team it is, we must defeat them. Shen Ruofei said. Fifan's players nodded one after another, and then turned to look at Liu Xibo. Why are you all looking at me? Liu Xibo said helplessly. Will I have any wrong reaction in this game? The reason why Fifan's match against Nanglo attracted people's attention, in addition to various factors such as the game situation, Liu Xibo is also a big attraction. As a talent that has always been favored by people in the Southland, Liu Xibo had a very good start. After he became an adult, he immediately created an account attribute of a god-level player in the new area. After entering the first-line team, he quickly showed an excellent state, won the best newcomer, and successfully joined the ranks of god-level players. His background, performance, and start can be said to be as good as it can be. Almost no one can compare with him in the start. Think about Lu Xiaoshan back then, it was almost such a good start. At the time, Cheng Fen did not have the status and achievements of the Southland. With Liu Xibo's performance at the time and the status of the Southland, although it was not 100%, to a large extent, he was very likely to become a player who dominated the league in the next 10 years. After all, Li Qing's and Lu Xiaoshan were not young anymore, and they would have to leave the stage sooner or later. At the time, it was very likely that Liu Xibo would dominate the world, even if he was a defensive player. Born in a famous family, became famous at a young age. Obviously, such a player is enough to become a symbol of the Southland, staying for more than 10 years, or even 20 years, and finally let his name be tied to such a wealthy family, and can never be separated. Liu Xibo did think so before. However, after only 2 seasons, the situation has changed drastically. He is no longer an indispensable figure in the club's top management. First, it is to appease Sun Fei. Second, some people in the top management are more optimistic about Yun. And third, because Chen Feng lost power, he seemed to have no future in Nanguo almost in an instant. From this perspective, Liu Xibo is of course very tragic. When he chose to sign with Fifan, many media sighed for it. After all, compared with the traditional strong team Nanguo, Fifan is like a new army. Even if they introduced Shen Ruofei and collected 4 god-level players at the time, the general media felt that this was a team of mercenaries. They might not be able to achieve any good results under the rule of Chain Head, and the situation of these 4 people sticking together would not last too long. If they can't get any owners, Liu Xibo will drift for a while and may be forgotten by everyone. However, it seems that Liu Xibo made a very good decision, while Nanguo made a very bad decision. Liu Xibo has won 2 championships since he arrived at Fifan, and is now making a push for the 5-time champion. What about Nanguo? Now they are not even in the top half of the standings. They are now ranked 11th. Although they will not be relegated, their results are also very bad. Under such circumstances, Fifan's championship process can be described as the last hard battle. How can people not pay attention to Fifan's encounter with Nanguo? In fact, we don't think there is anything wrong with you in the game, but we are a little afraid that you will feel embarrassed. Zheng Qi said. There is nothing to be embarrassed about. It's not like we didn't play against them in that first half of the season. Liu Xibo said. That's different. Now is the critical moment to win the championship. Of course, the difference is very big. Shinryo said lightly. As soon as these words came out, Liu Xibo had nothing to say. Shinryo's words were the truth. When they met in the first half of the season, although there was a gimmick that Liu Xibo played against Nanguo for the first time, how could it be possible that the game related to winning the championship was so interesting like now? Anyway, I won't have any special reaction. Sun Fei's offensive ability is excellent. The key to this game lies in your attackers, not me as a defensive player. Liu Xibo said. Zheng Qi laughed and didn't say much, but Liu Xibo's face was a little hot, because he knew that the key to this game was whether he could better control Sun Fei's scoring and killing ability. The current lineup of Nanguo is actually not bad. The overall performance is not good, mainly because the new coach has no authority, which often leads to problems in tactical arrangements and arrangements. Although their overall strength is strong, they are all teams in the Super League when facing any opponent. Do they want to win by relying on overall strength to suppress? That's really overthinking. Fifan's current lineup is definitely not able to do this, so although they won some games, they also lost more games, which make their ranking not very good, but this does not mean that there is anything wrong with their strength. Last year, Nanguo was one of the strongest contenders for the championship. Although they only finished 4th, they had the ability to challenge the league championship for a long time. It was not until the last 2 rounds that they had no hope. Such performance was not accidental. Their overall lineup was already quite outstanding. Both the offensive and defensive lines were extremely strong. Although head coach Chen Fen and Liu Xibo left because of the civil strife, their lineup was still outstanding. On defense, Xing was the main force, and Wazil was the auxiliary. A group of strong defenders did not reduce their defensive level too much. They dared to give up Liu Xibo, and that was also confident. Xing was only 5 or 6 years older than Liu Xibo, and was in his prime. Wazil and Liu Xibo were of the same age and seemed to have shown a good level. Under such circumstances, it seemed normal for Liu Xibo, who was not liked by the top management and had lost Chen Fen, to be abandoned. The offensive line has always been the strongest link of the southern country. Sun Fei is one of the top attackers who can compete with Lu Xiaoxun and others. In addition, Ban Qiu, Pan Jie, Yan Jianhua and other attackers who were also excellent players in the Super League assist. Even without Chen Fen, they are also extremely good at defense. They can basically score goals in every game, and even score a lot of goals. However, the overall tactical operation is not effective, so they will also lose a lot of goals. In this case, whether they can keep an eye on the offensive line represented by Sun Fei is really the key to winning this game. If they can keep an eye on Sun Fei and control the southern country's offense, then this game will have won 80%. Of course, this is not an easy thing to do. Fifan's defense is not particularly outstanding. It is very difficult to control the southern country's offense. However, no matter how difficult it is, Liu Xibo has to do it. After all, for him, if he can't prove his level better in this game, he may feel that he has failed even more. Liu Xibo had no personal grudge against Sun Fei, but no matter what, his and Chen Fen's forced departure had a lot to do with Sun Fei. Even if it wasn't for himself, even if it was just for his mentor Chen Fen, Liu Xibo had to perform well, defeat Sutland in this game, and strive for some owners to prove that it wasn't him or Chen Fen who was wrong. Even though there didn't seem to be any direct relationship between the two, the right and wrong in the professional arena was very simple: if you win, then you were right; if you lose, then you were wrong. This is what Liu Xibo wanted to prove the most. Chapter 858. The only comfort for the fans of Nanguo, their feelings towards Liu Xibo are now complicated. Of course, the club comes first, but if the team loses a top player due to the club's top management, which leads to poor results, then the club will also be blamed. However, the current situation is that Liu Xibo is excluded and Nanguo's results to decline, but Sun Fei, who had conflicts with him and the team, has a higher status, and his performance is not bad at all. In this way, the fans of Nanguo certainly feel extremely complicated and confused. They can't boo Liu Xibo. Liu Xibo is a victim, but they can't have any opinions about Sun Fei. Sun Fei is still their captain, the one who performed the best on the field, but for the players, there is nothing to be depressed and entangled. In any game, you must strive for victory. This is an undoubted thing. It's a good performance in Fifan, but Nanguo will always move towards a better goal. Sun Fei said when the two sides shook hands before the game. Liu Xibo nodded and didn't say much. He knew that his departure was related to Sun Fei, but the direct relationship was not that big. After all, Sun Fei wanted more attention to him tactically. Chen Feng's dismissal had more to do with Sun Fei. This was a kind of orthodoxy dispute. As a top attacker, Sun Fei certainly hoped that the team would play offensive tactics to bring out his level better. Liu Xibo's departure was more related to Zheng. Zheng and Liu Xibo were born in the same year and played in similar positions. If Liu Xibo didn't leave, he would never be able to stand out. Under such circumstances, Zheng took advantage of his better relationship with a certain senior executive of Nanguo and squeezed out Liu Xibo. Liu Xibo didn't have much opinion on Sun Fei. Even if he had, it was to complain to Chen Feng. As for Zheng, he was more annoyed. Boss Liu's performance this year is really outstanding. I have been studying your game videos. Zheng gave Liu Xibo a thumbs up with a look of no grudge. Although he was annoyed, Liu Xibo was very calm. He didn't react much to Zheng's words. He just nodded and walked towards the next opponent. He didn't react much, but his teammates reacted more strongly. Fuck, this guy is really a hypocrite Yubican, I really want to beat him up. Fulei said indignantly in the team channel. Although he and Liu Xibo only met this year, as a relatively unlucky player, Fulei didn't have any thoughts of fighting for power and profit, but he admired the players with outstanding strength very much. He also learned a lot from Liu Xibo this year, and Liu Xibo never had any arrogance towards Fulei, an ordinary player if not young, just because he was born in a famous family and became famous at a young age. So Fulei was also very impressed by Liu Xibo. Seeing Zheng's hypocritical appearance, of course he was very depressed. Professional players, don't be angry. Zheng Qi said in the team channel. It is normal to hit people on the field. After all, the game is a process of killing each other. However, if you hit the opponent before the game starts, you will be banned for a long time. Zheng might be deliberately provoking the anger of the extraordinary players and causing them to suffer non-combat casualties. I'm just talking. Fulei replied. He is not young anymore. He is almost 30 years old now. Of course, he won't be so angry. Watch me. Zheng Qi smiled. It was his turn to shake hands with Zheng. He immediately shook Zheng's hand and shook it warmly. Thank you for your support. Zheng Qi said with a smile. Now it was Zheng's turn to be confused. Captain Zheng, what happened? Thank you for your support to our Fifan. If it weren't for your help, how would we have the opportunity to sign a top player like Liu Xibo, a defender who can organize the entire defense line and is still so young? He can be the pillar of any team. As soon as Zheng Qi said this, Zheng's expression changed immediately, and the other people around him naturally heard it. The other players of Nanguo are not unaware of the fact that Zheng wanted to take the position himself and drive Liu Xibo away, but the players didn't have much to say about such things. However, if you think about the current ranking gap between Fifan and Nanguo carefully, although it cannot be said that Fifan's ranking is so good just because of Liu Xibo, it is enough to make people feel depressed. Especially Sun Fei, he had no opinion on Liu Xibo, and he didn't have much opinion on Chen Feng's defensive tactics. At most, he was a little resistant, and he felt that the tactics couldn't help Nanguo play a better role, so he showed his attitude in front of the club's top management. Now that Zheng Qi said this, Sun Fei couldn't help but wonder in his heart, could it be that Zheng was using me as a gum to help him get promoted? Of course, Sun Fei wouldn't do anything in this game because of this suspicion, but it was enough to make Zheng feel scared. Awesome, the captain is the captain. The extraordinary players thought in their hearts. When did you become so insidious? Shinryu Fei asked Zheng Qi. What? What I said was normal, you just thought it wrong. Zheng Qi smiled. Okay, play this game seriously and win the score back. Liu Xibo waved his fist and said. Before this highlight began, all other matches in this round had already ended. Zheng maintained its good momentum of scoring 5 goals in every recent game. They beat Yushan 5-0 at home, temporarily leading Fifen by 1 point, and also leading Fifen by 1 goal in goal difference. Of course, as long as Fifen can win this game, they can maintain a tie in goal difference, but this is no longer important, because as long as Zheng can continue to win, Fifen will lose the league championship even if he draws one more game. Zheng no longer has any disadvantage in goal difference. Fifen doesn't care much about this. What they want to maintain is the lead of 2 points. Although the goal difference seems to be very important, as long as they can win all the games, they will still be the champions even without the goal difference advantage. Fifen is very clear about this. When the game started, they started to attack. Liu Xibo sat on the sidelines and watched Fifen launch a fierce attack. Now is not the time to defend, so he does not need to play. Although Sun Fei is on the court, Nanguo is likely to score a goal through a counter-attack, but Fifen's rhythm will not be disrupted. When attacking, it is the stage for Shinryu Fei, Bin Shikai and Zheng Qi, and when defending, it is his stage for Liu Xibo. He believes that these attackers will not waste opportunities, just as he believes in his defensive ability. Nanguo's defense was very good last year, and it can even be said to be the first iron wall in the league. However, this year, their defense seems to be much worse, but Zheng Qi and others know that Liu Xibo's departure has not really made their defense that bad. After all, they still have many good players, including Xing Liken, Yun, and the group of defensive players who created a defensive miracle with Xing Liken and Liu Xibo last year. In terms of the overall defensive operation, they are a lot worse, but in terms of personal defensive ability, they are not much worse than last year. Fifen has a lot of experience in dealing with this kind of team whose individual defensive ability is not bad but the overall team is somewhat lacking. Because before Liu Xibo joined, Fifen was such a team. During the team training, they also knew how to deal with such a team. So after a series of attacks, they quickly talked through the opponent's defense line. After continuous mobilization and transfer, Fifen's attack bypassed Xing Liken's defense, and then when Zhu came to fill the position, he concentrated on annihilating a lot of the opponent's defensive forces, followed by a wave of strong attacks and scored a goal. Fifen scored the first goal at home. The Fifen fans in the stands immediately cheered loudly. Although they were stubbornly blocked by the opponent at the beginning, they still scored a goal quickly, which made the Fifen fans very happy. Nanguo is the last famous team. Fifen's opponents next are not very good. Everyone can see that as long as they can pass the Nanguo level, it will be very easy to win. We can't think like that. It's still very difficult to win every game. A fan said this in the stands, but it still couldn't stop the extraordinary fans from cheering loudly at this moment. The fans of Sutland were a little frustrated. They didn't expect their team to lose the ball so quickly. Although the defense of Sutland has declined a lot this year, it shouldn't lose the ball so quickly, right? They have always been used to Sutland's better offense. Last year's game was the first time that they felt that Sutland's game and defense were so reassuring. Even when facing Changfen, their defense line could remain unmoved, and then they would kill a strong team like Changfen with one blow. But this situation only lasted for one season. Soon, Sutland had internal problems. Then in this year's game, Sutland's defense began to appear less stable again. The only thing that reassured them was that Sutland's offense was getting more and more fierce. Although Sutland's performance this year was not good, in the game, the Sutland offensive line led by Sun Fei was always able to show the best state in the game and constantly scored goals. Even if they couldn't win, they would not miss the goal. This is also the only consolation for the fans of the Sutland in this season that is destined to be a failure. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 859. All are growing. The strong offensive performance at Nanguo this year has a lot to do with Sun Fei. Sun Fei is 26 years old this year. He has been a main player in Nanguo for 8 years and has been a god-level player for 5 or 6 years. This is his best time. His age, experience, operation level, mentality, have all reached their peak. Such a god-level player should have achieved results, but he did not achieve results last year and encountered civil strife this year. If it were an ordinary person, he would have felt extremely depressed. However, Sun Fei did not seem particularly depressed. Instead, he showed an extremely outstanding state. Heroes emerge in troubled times. This year, Nanguo's overall performance has declined a lot, but Sun Fei's personal performance has been much better. Everyone can see this. Such performance is actually not only beneficial to the individual players, but also to the entire club. The performance of a top player can be very attractive. How did Zheng Qi grow up? In the year when Lu Xiaoshan emerged, Zheng Qi actually only won the 6th place in the league, which was not a very good result. However, his performance attracted a large number of outstanding players. Coupled with the club's prompt replacement, Zheng Qi rose so quickly and became a strong team that dominated the league. Although Nanguo's performance this year was not good, if Sun Fei's performance was good enough, he might be able to attract a large number of strong players in the transfer market next year. With a fully mature Sun Fei as the core, it would not be a rare thing to immediately build an extremely strong team. Sun Fei and Nanguo are now in a relationship of mutual prosperity. Sun Fei's good performance means that Nanguo has hope. Nanguo has hope as a whole, and Sun Fei's good performance means that there is hope. And then Sun Fei quickly proved his status. Nanguo launched a massive counterattack. The extraordinary attackers went off the court to rest. Only Zheng Qi and Li Gurui were left on the court to prepare for the counterattack. The rest were the backline led by Liu Shbo, who began to concentrate on resisting Nanguo's attack. Although they were concentrating on defense, they couldn't help thinking about attacking. Zheng Qi and Li Gurui were ready to counterattack at any time on the court. Almost all teams would do this, but it depended on whether the main core players had more time on the court. The main core players certainly needed to stay on the court for a longer time, so that they could play their roles better. However, if they were on the court for too long, they would be affected by fatigue. In this case, how to balance the time of the main core players on the court was also a very particular matter. However, Sun Fei was an exception. He was similar to Lu Xiaoshan. He was running around on the court, but he didn't consume much energy. This allowed him to stay on the court for a longer time without his condition declining. He got the title of the King of Killers by frontal impact. This was really different from Fan Yuan and Daixing. He was even better than Lu Xiaoshan in frontal impact in killing opponents. However, due to personality and other issues, he couldn't reach the level of Lu Xiaoshan. But in terms of operation, his operation level was not inferior to anyone else. Compared with Lu Xiaoshan, he was not much worse. Among the god-level players, his level was also at the forefront. Sun Fei naturally hit something to be proud of. This time he quickly created a gap in the front. When Liu Shbo came to block him, he suppressed Liu Shbo. Through his own operation and continuous attack, Liu Shbo could not resist. Offense is the most important thing. What's the use of defense? Without top attackers and matching tactics, it is just empty talk to want to win. Sun Fei attacked Liu Shbo like a storm, and the other teammates around him also pressed forward. With the help of his suppression, they broke through the Fifan defense line in one breath. After cutting the Fifan defense line, the next thing was simple. Cover on both sides, rush in the middle, and then score a goal. Seeing that Nanguo also used a wonderful and very refreshing attack to quickly equalize the score, the Nanguo fans in the stand cheered involuntarily. They can now rest assured that their captain and core are fine, and there is no problem with the offense, so there will be no big problems in the game. Looking at Sun Fei running towards his half with his head held high, Zheng Qi clicked his tongue twice. This guy's operation is really fierce. The only person in the entire league who can operate better than him is probably Lu Xiaoshan. Zheng Qi said in the team channel, and then everyone heard Shinryu snort. Because he was on the court for both offense and defense just now, it was Zheng Qi's turn to rest. After Zheng Qi sat on the bench, Liu Shbo said to him, "It's not appropriate for you to stimulate Shinryu like this. Don't worry, with Brother Fei's personality, he can perform better if he is stimulated." Zheng Qi laughed. Liu Shbo thought about it and found that it was true. Shinryu is a very proud person. At the same time, he is also a player who will never give up attacking. In frontal impact, he has his own pride. Even Lu Xiaoshan will not make him feel convinced. And now, he is facing a player who is recognized to be able to compete with Lu Xiaoshan in frontal attack. Facing such an opponent, Shinryu fighting spirit would have exploded long ago, not to mention that he was stimulated by Zheng Qi. Liu Shbo trusted Shinryu's strength, but he was also familiar with Sun Fei. He could judge that Shinryu might not be much worse in terms of operation level, but in terms of status and experience, Sun Fei was much better. After all, Sun Fei was at his peak now, and compared with Lu Xiaoshan, who was a little older, he was not inferior. Of course, Shinryu Fei was younger, and his peak had not yet arrived. It was only a matter of time before he surpassed Sun Fei and Lu Xiaoshan. But Sun Fei was at his peak now. Should Shinryu Fei not confront him head-on and wait until he got old? Of course not. A top player needs to have the courage to face a strong opponent, and can't think that I will be the first when he gets old. To put it cruelly, the status of the arena is earned through fighting, not by others' selection. If you don't show something in the direct confrontation, no matter how many people you know, how popular you are among the fans, and how many votes you get, it doesn't prove that you're better. Who is better can only be known after the confrontation on the field. Shinryu Fei's fighting spirit in this game is indeed not bad at all. After the restart, he quickly led Fifan to launch an attack. Shinryu Fei's personal characteristics are very distinct, which also makes it easy for him to be out of touch with his teammates in the game. This has been there since the beginning, in the 2 years of Changfen, and after coming to Fifan. However, everyone has always paid attention to the distance and support between him. In Changfen, it was Lu Xiaoshan who consciously supported Shinryu Fei, and when he came to Fifan, whether it was Zheng Qi or Bin Shikai, they would assist him in this regard, so that he could better play his personal strength without being out of touch with his teammates too slowly. The reason why everyone cooperated with him was mainly because Shinryu Fei's personal offensive ability was indeed too outstanding. In frontal attack, his operation was not inferior to any top god known for frontal attack. Such offensive ability is something that no team would be willing to give up. Shinryu Fei was so motivated to deal with the next attack this time. Zheng Qi had no doubt about his operation, but he was a little worried that he would cause big problems for Fifan's attack because of his overaggression. The more violent the attack, the better. The principle of tension and relaxation is applicable everywhere. For Fifan, their attack has always been very complete. Shinryu Fei attacks head-on, Zheng Qi supports from behind, and Bin Shikai is ready to attack at any time. Even if there are only 2 people on the court, their mutual cooperation will not be bad. Zheng Qi and Shinryu Fei are very familiar with each other, and Bin Shikai is experienced and sophisticated. There will be no problem in supporting. However, Shinryu Fei's fighting spirit is too high at this time. Bin Shikai is old after all, and it is possible that he can't keep up all of a sudden. In Zheng Qi's heart, Fifan's attack quickly began. When the 2 sides came into contact, Zheng Qi put aside his worries and smiled slightly. Shinryu Fei has not stagnated in the past few years. He has been growing. Although in the 2 years of Changfen and after coming to Fifan, he still showed the kind of brave and fearless style on the court, it does not mean that he does not know that he needs to make changes in this regard, but he feels that his impact has not yet reached the peak. Only after reaching the peak in this regard, and then improving the shortcomings, can he become more outstanding. He has always been a very calm player who knows his level. This has never changed. His character is proud enough, but it will not make him arrogant. So Zheng Qi laughed. He felt that he might be too familiar with Shinryu Fei, so that he unconsciously had a fixed mindset and put a template on Shinryu Fei, but he didn't know that Shinryu Fei had also grown a lot. Shinryu Fei's frontal attack was blocked by Sun Fei. In the operation of head-on confrontation, Sun Fei is not inferior to anyone. However, when fighting with Shinryu Fei, Sun Fei was shocked to find that this player who was 4 or 5 years younger than him was not worse than himself in terms of operation level and timing. How is this possible? Sun Fei was a little surprised. He launched another attack out of disbelief, but was completely defeated by Shinryu Fei. This was not an illusion. When Sun Fei thought of this, the defense of the Southern Kingdom collapsed. Sun Fei had an extremely outstanding level on both offensive and defensive this year, which was also reflected in defensive. However, after he was entangled by Shinryu Fei, the extraordinary offensive formation led by Bin Shikai had cleared all the teammates around him, and then double-teamed him, keeping him as well. Chapter 860 Chen Feng's worry. Fifan took the lead again. Both sides scored 3 goals in the first 10 minutes of the first half, and they all showed an extremely good state. This is a really good thing for the fans. After all, these 3 goals were scored after showing an extremely good level. Such a confrontation on the field actually made the audience very happy. They came to watch the game just to see this. Of course, what we have to watch now is Fifan's victory, for Fifan's fans. After the opening, both sides scored consecutive goals. In the following time, the 2 sides of the game fell into a certain stalemate. After all, for both sides, such back-and-forth attacks are certainly very exciting, but they are also uncontrollable. Especially Fifan's side, they are not afraid of mutual explosions with Nanguo, but such mutual explosions are obviously uncontrollable and not in Fifan's interests. Nanguo doesn't care. They are still very happy when they explode. With Sun Fei's offensive ability, as long as it is mutual explosions, he doesn't have to worry about anything. The more chaotic the game, the better his level is, and the greater the possibility of the team's victory. The South Country didn't really care about the outcome of this game. They just wanted to perform better in the game. Such a team, such a mentality, is often more difficult to deal with than a team that is challenging for the championship. The two sides began to fight on the court, which made Fifan's fans a little depressed. They would rather see the team knock down the opponent like a storm, which is the most pleasant feeling. However, in fact, in the eyes of the commentators, they are more optimistic about Fifan. What the South Country wants to do most is to disrupt the battle. Fifan also has the ability to disrupt the battle, but they still control the overall rhythm. This controllability is too important. Fifan's performance this year is indeed not something that can be obtained casually. Yuan Fei sighed. Many people don't understand this truth, but more people understand it immediately. Compared with the South Country, Fifan can now play more steadily or more messily. In between the two, they can play almost the same. What is this? This is dominance. Only a team with dominance can win in the game. In the game, they wanted to control the rhythm at a slower pace, and they did it immediately, which proved that they also had enough control on the field. It is not difficult to do this, but it depends on the level of the opponent. Facing the middle and lower teams, Fifan did this without any surprise. However, when facing the South Country, they were able to show dominance and control, which is enough to prove that Fifan's current level is indeed the best in the entire league. What kind of level can such a team show in the game? Yuan Fei is very much looking forward to this. Yuan Fei is over 60 years old this year. He has been a professional player since he was 17 years old. After being a professional player for 20 years, he retired at the age of 37 and then became a commentator. Until today, it can be said that his life has basically been given to the football era game. He has witnessed many powerful teams, but no team has ever been able to win the honor of the 5-time champion. So many top players are just one step away from their peak. What about Fifan? Yuan Fei didn't know if he would have the chance to witness the birth of the 5-time champion. He only knew that the current Fifan was a team with a great chance to create such a miracle. Even if no team had ever won the 5-time champion, this would not make him lose hope. He would only be more eager to see what the result of this season would be. Commentators of his age had long understood that the process was the most important truth. The two sides were constantly entangled on the field. Although they were both good at attacking, after Fifan intentionally slowed down the pace of the game, it was a big troublesome to score a goal. The two sides constantly launched a block in the midfield, and then constantly delayed the rhythm of the opponent's attack, looking for opportunities to disrupt the opponent's attack. Such tactics can be regarded as a very normal game tactic. After all, not every attack can score a goal. In fact, every time you want to suppress the opponent and then look for opportunities, this seemingly safe offensive method requires a lot of preparation and effort to achieve it. Once you can't suppress the opponent's counter-attack may be able to score a goal. Like the classical football in the past, the current football era is also a game where scoring sometimes looks very easy and sometimes very difficult. As the stalemate continued, Fifan didn't think there was anything wrong. They were still in the lead, but Nanguo was getting impatient. Especially Sun Fei, he didn't care much about the win or loss, but in this situation, his personal level could not be reflected, and Nanguo couldn't show their overall strength. This was not a good thing for Nanguo's attractiveness in the transfer market next year. Now everyone can see that Fifan is almost unstoppable this year. If they can still keep these good players, then there is only one way to fight against them, that is, to introduce more good players to organize a stronger team and put pressure on them. Of course, to become such a team, you have to have some qualifications. Now Zheng Qi and Tin He are obviously qualified to do so. They will definitely make big moves in the transfer market next year. This year, they have introduced Xing and Peng respectively, which proves this point. However, blocking a super strong team certainly cannot rely on only two teams, but also requires a large number of backbone forces. By then, whether it is Kenning or Nanguo, it is possible to become such a team. In the final analysis, it is necessary to build confidence in those outstanding players, so that the other party will be willing to join you. If you lose without any tempo when facing Fifan, no matter how outstanding you are, no one will be willing to join you. In this regard, Zheng Qi is a very tragic example. Their performance against Fifan is too poor, so next year, several core players may have to leave 1 or 2, and it is even more impossible to introduce good players. So Sun Fei is anxious not because he has no chance to perform, but for the overall interests of the South. So in the next attack, his forced cut seems a little anxious. He certainly rushed in, but the teammates who followed behind were surrounded by Fifan's heavy troops. No matter how good Sun Fei is, he can only helplessly face Liu Xibo and others who have the advantage in numbers at this time. Under the command of Liu Xibo, the Fifan players concentrated their fire and killed Sun Fei, and then started to counterattack. This time, the timing is really good. Zheng Qi praised Liu Xibo, who had just left the court, and then went on the court himself. Liu Xibo smiled but did not answer. He knew that he could do this mainly because of Sun Fei's mistakes. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to catch his gaps. To defend against attackers of this level, is it just a matter of forcing them? Wearing down their fighting spirit, letting them have problems due to fatigue, or reducing their number of attacks, using our own attacks to suppress the opponent and win? Liu Xibo thought to himself. He was a very good defensive player, but in the current competition, defensive players would face a very embarrassing problem. No matter how much they defended, they could not win by just using defensor. Defensor improvement was more of a bonus item, not a decisive item. The decisive item was always in the hands of those attackers. This made Liu Xibo a little regretful, because even if Team had won, it seemed that it could not prove that the tactics of the Southland at the time were correct, and Sun Fei's persistence was wrong. In Liu Xibo's heart, he still wanted to prove that his mentor Chen Feng was right in doing it last year. What I did last year? Of course it was not wrong. Strengthening defensor can improve the overall performance of the team. In fact, last year, Nangua was so close to the championship for the first time in 5 years. Chen Feng, who was far away in City B, took a sip of beer and answered. Yes, he did play very well last year, but Sun Fei was dissatisfied. Zheng Qi laughed. This guy is still a little behind Lu Xiaoshan. In terms of talent and operation level, he is not inferior at all, but he has been suppressed by Lu Xiaoshan for so many years. It's not because he thinks that his character attributes are inferior to Lu Xiaoshan. Chen Feng laughed and answered. 865 versus 918, there is indeed a certain gap. 53 attribute points, all of which are spent on a certain attribute, can form a great advantage. Zheng Qi thought for a while and said. That is not the decisive factor. Chen Feng shook his head. His vision and overall situation are just a little behind. I used many methods to improve his level in these 2 aspects, but he was unhappy instead and felt that I was nitpicking him. Chen Feng laughed. No wonder there is such a big conflict all of a sudden, the ice is 3 feet thick. Zheng Qi sighed. Defensor and offensive are never viewed separately. I never thought of depriving him of his core position. I just strengthened defensor and was able to attack well, but he couldn't stand it. In fact, it was okay because of good results during the season, but later when he didn't win the championship, the conflict broke out. Chen Feng spread his hands and said helplessly. If he could see the long term and see more clearly, this year should be a 4-country military chess, not the romance of the 3 kingdoms. Zheng Qi couldn't help laughing. That can't be helped. The past is the past. Nanguo's performance declined this year. Let's see if it can be better next year. What I am worried about now is Liu Xibo. Chen Feng said. Are you worried that he will be confused because he finds that defensor still can't deal with offensive? Zheng Qi's words are very sharp. That's it, confidence is very important. If he even doubts what he is best at, it will have a great impact on his future development. It's a pity that I am not his coach now, so I can't remind him properly. Chen Feng sighed. Zheng Qi thought about it but didn't answer. Chapter 861. Horizon. Chen Feng's worry was obviously not groundless. He was too familiar with Liu Xibo. In fact, Liu Xibo was trained by him. He knew that his disciple had a strong and cheerful character. It could be said that he had a very good character. Such a character was the best choice for both being a person and a professional player. But what did the saying go? Good people tend to get stuck in a dead end. If Liu Xibo got stuck in a dead end, it would have a great impact on his future development. A player could be shaken in other aspects, but he must never be shaken in his position and characteristics. Once he was shaken, not to mention progress, even regression was a common thing. Don't worry, Fifan and his gang are good at something. Zheng Qi patted Chen Feng on the shoulder. I don't think you need to worry too much about this. He can adjust himself. Even if he can't adjust, there are Zheng Qi and others to help. Chen Feng nodded. He was not very familiar with Zheng Qi and Shin, but he was not unfamiliar with them. After all, they had played against each other several times. From their styles, we can see that the personalities of these two people are very suitable for being professional players. Shin is stronger when facing strong opponents and never backs down. Although Zheng Qi is jumpy, he is a very smart player. Even if he encounters setbacks, he will not be discouraged, but will think about how to get around the setbacks. It is hard to say which of these two personalities is good or bad. In short, as professional players, these two personalities are very suitable. They will not be discouraged by temporary setbacks, nor will they be discouraged by a major setback. With their characteristics, even if Liu Shibo has any problems, they can find them in time, right? What's more, as long as Fifan can win this game, the impact on Liu Shibo will be smaller. Even though his performance was not as good as the opponent's, the team won, which was also his victory. There are many ways to win, Liu Shibo knew this a long time ago. On the court, Fifan launched a counter-attack again, and Nanguo also began to defend. The score was now a tie, and there was not much time left in the first half. Nanguo certainly hoped to keep the tie until the start of the second half, so that at least it could put more psychological pressure on Fifan. Even if Chen Feng always thought that Sun Fei had shortcomings that could not be solved, his level was there, and few people could compare with him. He was not only good at attacking, but also good at defending. Such players often had extremely outstanding levels on both offensive and defensive, just like Lu Xiaoshan. Once he retreated to help defend, he could also make Chen Feng's defense seem like a solid wall. The value of players like Sun Fei lies here. He can stay on the court for a longer time, and at the same time, he can fully exert his level on both offensive and defensive, making the competitiveness of the entire team even better. This guy is also very good at defensive, brother Fei, go and entangle him. Zheng Qi said in the team channel. It's very difficult. We entangled him once before. He won't be fooled this time. Shin Fei replied. You entangle him, and Boss Bin and I will assist you. Let's kill him first. Zheng Qi said, Boss Liu, get ready to play. When we focus our fire, you'll have to organize the defense to protect us. Liu Shibo on the bench was stunned for a moment, then immediately nodded and prepared to replace him. After teammates leave the court, they have to wait 10 seconds before they can play. In these 10 seconds, Fifan, who has the initiative in attack, is not worried about the opponent's counter-attack and goal. However, Liu Shibo suddenly thought of a lot in these 10 seconds. He is a defensive player. Most of the time, he plays in defensive. Sometimes he can resist the opponent's attack, and sometimes he can't. But in the current offensive situation, the team also needs defensive players to pay when attacking. He is still useful in this situation. He is a defensive player, but he can also play an extremely important role in attacking. Look at Sun Fei on the court. He is a standard defensive player. However, when defending, he can still reduce the pressure on defense and create great trouble for the opponent's offense by using offense. On the court, defense and offense are sometimes inseparable. Even if you want to separate them, it is not so easy. Thinking of this, Liu Shibo suddenly felt much lighter in his heart. In fact, he understands all these principles, how could he not understand them? This is the simplest and most plain truth. It's just that he is used to playing defensive, so he got stuck in a dead end for a while. Now that he is not stuck in a dead end, his thinking immediately becomes broader. Whether he is good at defensive or defensive, he is a player. Maybe ordinary defensive players can't play any role in offensive, but is he an ordinary defensive player? He is not. He is a player who can organize the defense line. When attacking, he can also use defensive skills to open the way for his teammates and guard the teammate. This approach shows value that can not only be reflected in defensive. There are still many things I can do. Liu Shibo thought to himself. At this time, the 10-second cooling time had passed, and he quickly stepped into the court. Hey, his expression has changed. Zheng Qi vision is also very good, and he immediately noticed something wrong. Is there such a rich inner transformation in just a short time? It seems that I am still not familiar with him enough, Chen Feng said speechlessly. It depends on the performance, it depends on the performance. Zheng Qi laughed. Chen Feng also inevitably fell into a fixed mindset, because he started to train Liu Shibo very early, so in Chen Feng's heart, Liu Shibo will always be a child. Maybe he doesn't think so, but deep in his heart, he will always worry that he can't do this or that well, that is, he treats Liu Shibo as a child. However, Liu Shibo is no longer a child. He has spent 3 years in the professional league, and now it is his 4th season. These few years are enough for him to become mature and have better self-regulation ability. Although he is a player who has achieved great success early, he is only in his early 20s, but 3 seasons of training are enough to make him quite mature. On the court, Fifan's substitution was actually very concealed. They controlled the situation. It was not until Liu Xibo appeared in the sight of the Southland players that the Southland players discovered that Fifan had made a substitution. Changed the defensive player. Sun Fei snorted in his heart. He actually had no opinion on Liu Xibo, but what happened last season made him dislike the defensive players. What's the use of putting a defensive player on at this time? Are you afraid that we will counter-attack? It's really bad. Sun Fei thought to himself. This is also his biggest weakness. He is not careful enough. In fact, it is not right to say so, because in the specific tactical details, he will not miss anything. Otherwise, no matter how good his operation is, he will not become a top player. He can only see the players in front of him. No matter how outstanding his level is, he can't reach a very high level. To put it bluntly, Chen Feng's evaluation of Sun Fei is still very correct. This player has no problems in other places, but his vision is too narrow and his realm is not high enough. This also makes him never reach the height of Lu Xiaoshan and Meng Fifan in the past. In fact, in terms of operation level, there are not a few top attackers who can compete with Lu Xiaoshan and Meng Fifan, but there is not a single one who can reach that level, because the height of a player cannot be achieved by technology alone, but also requires many factors. The top players need many factors. Talent is a must, diligence is a must, and luck is also a must, but there are always many top professional players who have these 3 points. As long as there are many people participating, talented people will naturally stand out. The modern training system also makes it easier for geniuses to stand out. Diligence is the duty of a professional player. It is not difficult to have these 3 points. On this basis, if you want to go higher and further, it depends more on personal quality and vision. The quality here is not the character, but the quality of being a professional player. Any professional player who reaches the top may have different personalities, but there are many common points, that is, bravery, perseverance, and never give up. As for personal vision, it is a somewhat illusory realm. However, players with a high realm, supported by the previous factors, can often stand higher and see farther than players of the same level. This is undoubtedly very important. Sun Fei could not see Fifan's intention of changing players at this time, which was also that key to his failure to reach the peak. So when he saw Fifan's 3 core players start to attack him at the same time, he did not feel afraid, but felt that it was a good opportunity. He attracted the 3 opponents, and then his teammates focused their fire together, and he could kill all 3 of the opponent's core players. At the time, he could take advantage of the situation and push back, and maybe he could take the lead in the first half. Of course, it is not wrong to think so, but after seeing Liu Xibo on the court, he still thought so, which showed that Sun Fei's thinking was a bit narrow and not careful enough. He began to stubbornly resist the opponent's fierce attack without retreating, just thinking that his teammates could focus their fire to kill the opponent. In fact, his instructions had already been issued, and his teammates also faithfully executed his instructions. However, when the players of the Southland wanted to focus their fire, they found themselves blocked. There were 10 of them, but Fifan only hit 7. However, under the command of Liu Xibo, the 7 completely withstood their concentrated fire and temporarily entangled them. Although such entanglement would not last too long, it was often enough in the game. The support he wanted did not come, and Sun Fei was now at a loss. Just facing Shen Fei was already very strenuous for him, not to mention the additional Zheng Qi who could take advantage of loopholes and the experienced Bin Xiaoqiang. Under the siege of 3 god-level players, Sun Fei could not hold on for long and soon turned into light and left the field. When he left the field, Zheng Qi and others had already turned back and killed them. Under the command of Liu Xibo, they blocked all other players from the south country and opened up a channel for attack. The next moment, Fifan scored a goal and took the lead again. Sun Fei, who was off the field, looked at this scene depressed and could not speak. Chapter 862. Maintaining the advantage. What a wonderful defenser. Zheng Qi said with some regret. It was wonderful. There is nothing to say about Zheng Qi and the other 3 beating up Sun Fei. It is news that they failed to beat him up. However, Liu Xibo's command just now made the terrain and time factors run to the extreme. He is really talented in defensa. Chen Feng said. You must be very proud of training such a player. Zheng Qi laughed. What is there to be proud of? I spent 5 years training him, but now it has become a barking for your son's team. Chen Feng said. Anyway, I'm not the boss of Nanguo anymore. Zheng Qi laughed. With these people, there is hope to challenge the 5-time champion. There is a lot of hope. There should be no problem inside them. At least, there will be no problem with the people who are the key to their victory or defeat. Chen Feng said after thinking for a while. Zheng Qi has been paying attention to and observing other people in Fifan. With his judgment and observation ability, if there is really someone who is Wu Jie, he will find it. Zheng Qi took a sip of water and replied. Boss, you really have a plan. Chen Feng sighed. Chen Feng shook his head and said nothing more. In his opinion, he, a former professional lead practitioner, needs to consider the problem from these aspects instead of the game itself, which is a kind of sadness. The current league is prosperous, but deformed. I don't have the ability to promote the destruction of such a league, but I can at least help my son. Zheng Qi said. It seems that the league is fine. Nanguo will not have a chance to beat Fifan in this game. A draw is impossible. Chen Feng changed the subject. Maybe there will be a turnaround in the second half. Zheng Qi laughed. It's impossible. It depends on how many goals we win. Chen Feng said affirmatively. Chen Feng, such an experienced head coach, can say such words so affirmatively, which is enough to prove that he is very sure about the result of this game. This is indeed the case. After taking the lead in the first half, Fifan's advantage was not very large. However, after the start of the second half, their advantage began to grow. On the court, they constantly pressed the opponent as a whole. When defending, they took every step carefully, wearing down the opponent's morale. Even if Nanguo could score a goal in the end, it was quite tiring. On offense, they kept pulling back and forth, making Nanguo's defense exhausted, and then scored a goal with minimal consumption. In such consumption, Sun Fei, who played for a long time, soon felt tired. With his playing style, theoretically there would be no problem even if he played the whole game, but in this game, Sun Fei had to pay full attention to many details, which made him quickly feel tired and forced to rest off the court. Otherwise, even if he was barely on the court, he would not perform well, so it would be better to rest off the court. However, as soon as he left the court, Fifan took advantage of the situation and launched a fierce attack, attacking Nanguo's defense head-on, beating Xinglikan and Wazil and others into a mess. Xinglikan was also a defensive core with strong organizational ability, but his personal confrontation ability was not very good, and Wazil was also such a player. When facing Fifan's head-on attack and hard attack, they immediately couldn't support it. The fans of South China in the stands looked at the court in silence. When Sun Fei was on the court, South China played well. Although it was at a disadvantage, it was not too disadvantageous. However, as soon as Sun Fei left the court, he was immediately beaten by the opponent. Sun Fei was indeed very powerful, but the other players of South China seemed a little too weak, right? This idea was of course incorrect. After Sun Fei left the court, Fifan seized this opportunity to strengthen the offense, which made the gap between the two players a little big. However, in this case, it did not mean that without Sun Fei, South China could not even play well. This idea could only cause a split between Sun Fei and other players, and South China could not afford such a split now. In this case, the defensive players of South China still showed their fighting spirit and tenacity. However, when the whole team was suppressed, the fighting spirit and tenacity of individuals could only appear tragic and would not have any effect. Seeing that the situation on the court was not good, Sun Fei wanted to go on the court early, but was stopped by the head coach. Going on the court early at this time would not have any effect. If he could not bear it, he would give up the hope of winning this game. So Sun Fei could only sit on the sidelines, hoping that his teammates would support him for a while longer. However, his hopes were dashed. Fifan quickly broke through the defense of the southern country and scored a goal, expanding the lead to 2 goals. The southern country launched a counter-attack, but their counter-attack still had no effect. Fifan's defense was quite solid. Without the pressure created by Sun Fei, the defense commanded by Liu Shibo could almost be said to be watertight, leaving the southern country with no way out. When did Fifan's defense become so good? Zheng Qi asked in surprise. You know, even if Sun Fei was not there, the southern country still had a lot of offensive players, each of whom was a famous player in the league. How could they not create any opportunities? Their defense is much better now, but it won't be this good. It's just because the southern country's offense is too dependent on Sun Fei. Without Sun Fei, their offense is missing a lot of things. Chen Feng said lightly. Obviously, Because of the decline in performance this year, the whole team began to play more around Sun Fei, which made other offensive players unconsciously rely on Sun Fei. In this case, their autonomy certainly decreased a lot. In the usual games, they might not see anything, but in such games, problems are easily exposed. When Fifan once again successfully stopped the attack of the Southland, Sun Fei couldn't help it. Although he still needed to rest, he couldn't sit still when he saw that Fifan was likely to expand the lead to 3 goals. The victory or defeat of this game was indeed irrelevant, but he couldn't be beaten so badly by Fifan. Losing 1 or 2 would be fine, but losing 3, 4, 5 or 6 would be too embarrassing. His appearance stabilized the turmoil of the Southland at the moment. From this point of view, Sun Fei's vision was still very accurate, although it was only in such details. Seeing Sun Fei on the court, Chen Feng was more certain that Fifan would have no problem in this game. They would definitely win. Maybe there would not be a big win, but at least there would be a stable victory. After Sun Fei came on the court, Nanguo resisted Fifan's next attack, and in the following attack, through a series of forced breakthroughs, finally scored a goal after spending a lot of time, reducing the disadvantage to 1 point. This boosted the morale of Nanguo's players. However, in the next game, Fifan suppressed Nanguo again. Although Sun Fei worked hard on the court and other players also worked hard, their situation on the court was still gradually suppressed by Fifan. Why did it suddenly fail? Many fans of Nanguo felt extremely depressed and strange about this situation. After all, although Nanguo was at a disadvantage before, it still played well and the situation was not very passive. Why did it suddenly fail? Fans naturally did not pay attention to such details. Although Sun Fei's early appearance achieved good results temporarily, he did not get enough good news. In other words, Nanguo's temporary improvement in performance was at the cost of the lack of strength in the next counter-attack, but this scene happened in advance. Fifan's pressing and oppression played an extremely huge role. As for the southern country, they wanted to fight back, but they were somewhat powerless. Sun Fei was entangled by Liu Shibo when attacking, and by Shinrao Fei when defending, which greatly affected his performance. Even the top players could not stand this. When Sun Fei was in trouble, other players of the southern country could not help him well, which was also a very fatal thing. The poor performance of the southern country this year is indeed a problem as a whole. To solve this problem, we need to work hard on tactics instead of just relying on signings. In terms of personnel composition, the current southern country is still first class, but they are so obviously different from Fifan. In terms of tactical operation, they are too far behind. The impact caused by Chen Feng's departure is probably more far-reaching than everyone imagines. Yuan Fei sighed. Grandpa Yuan Fei still has a good vision. Zheng Qi couldn't help laughing. Of course. When I was still a professional player, he was already a senior who had retired for many years. How many years have I been a coach now? Although he has not coached a team or played in a game for so many years, his commentary level has kept pace with the times. His vision is certainly not bad. Chen Feng replied. You and he both think so. It seems that Fifan will have no problem winning this game. Zheng Qi said. Chen Feng nodded slightly. Fifan really controlled the situation on the field in the remaining time and expanded the lead again. Although Sun Fei's burst before the end of the game once again reduced the score to 1 goal, it still couldn't stop Fifan from winning this game. What a pity, we only won by 1 goal. When the Fifan fans in the stands cheered loudly, there were still many Fifan fans who sighed and felt a little regretful. Winning only 1 goal made Fifan tied with Tin He in terms of goal difference, which was obviously a bit disadvantageous. The goal difference advantage that had reached double digits was now tied. It was inevitable that people felt that Tin He's momentum was really overwhelming. Don't worry, it's okay, we're still 2 points ahead. The leading score is the key, and the goal difference can only work when the score is tied. So don't worry, let's play well next time and win 1 game after another. Even if Tin He has a higher goal difference, it will be meaningless. And their companions often answered them with such confidence. Of course, there is a reason for their confidence. In the next game, Fifan's opponents are not very strong. Even if they only win a small victory in each game, as long as they insist on winning all the games, the championship will be theirs. A 2-point advantage cannot be cancelled casually. Chapter 863 Li Qing's efforts. Fifan's players actually thought the same way. It's not that they can't win a big victory, but if they want a big victory, they have to take risks, constantly attack, tear, and cause huge problems for the opponent's defense line. Tin He has done this in the past few rounds. Although every game is a big win, in fact, for insiders, they are actually gambling in every game. Either a big win, or problems will arise and they will be defeated or tied by the opponent. Tin He is a pursuer, they have to do this, and Fifan is the leader. Do they need to do this? Of course there is no need. All they need is to win one game after another steadily. They still have a 2-point advantage, and they will maintain this 2-point advantage until the end. They have such confidence. Especially after winning the South Country is their last obstacle. The next opponents are relatively much weaker. As long as they perform well, it is not uncommon for them to crush their opponents. Of course, the premise is that they don't make any mistakes in the game and don't be careless. In fact, Fifan has a big advantage now. There are still 5 rounds left in the league. With their status, they can adjust. The most dangerous time is actually in the first few rounds. In the Cup League, they will encounter strong teams continuously. If they are not careful, they will easily lose several games in a row and then collapse. However, Fifan survived. Their points advantage played a role but 4. After 2 draws, they still had the points advantage, and then they continued to win and continued to suppress Tin He. Even if Tin He does not collapse first under such circumstances, Fifan will not matter. They have the points advantage. If they keep winning, the championship will belong to them. In fact, even Li Qing's knows in his heart that Tin He has little chance to win the championship. It was the best opportunity before. Fifan, who was mainly composed of young players, would easily have huge problems if there was a little change in emotion or a mistake in performance at the time. This is something that is difficult to avoid. Although they have accumulated enough experience last year, they are still far behind teams like Zheng Qi. However, under such a difficult situation, Fifan was extremely calm. They first forced 2 opponents to draw. Although they lost points, they still maintained their advantage. Then, in the games against Xingyu and Nanglo, they won by 1 goal each, showing their overall strength to the fullest. What else can Li Qing say when he meets such a calm team? His only hope now is that Fifan himself will make a huge mistake in the remaining 5 rounds of the league. After all, even a draw is enough for Tin He to tie the points. Therefore, Tin He needs to do a better job of grabbing the goal difference, so as to avoid the opponent encountering a draw, but Tin He loses to the opponent in the goal difference. That would be a more depressing thing. Our opponent in the next round is not easy to deal with. Fifan's opponent is relatively easier to deal with. Li Qing's thought silently in his heart. Of course, he is very clear about the situation of the game. In the next round, Fifan will play against Minfeng. Minfeng is now a relegation team. Their fighting spirit may be very strong, but in terms of level, it seems to be much worse than Fifan. Fighting spirit is of course important, but at this time, it is hard to say whether the fighting spirit of relegation is superior to the fighting spirit of winning the championship. Fifan's strength advantage is real. If Fifan himself does not have any problems, there will be no impact. Even if they play a steady game attack and aim to win, they will have a great chance of winning. Tin He's opponent is more outstanding. Qixinfeng, which is now ranked 5th, was ranked 6th before, but Tianlong's state has declined in recent rounds, and its results have dropped a bit, and Qixinfeng has surpassed it. Hongyuan, which was ranked 6th before, has been in a worse state recently and has slipped to the 10th place. Of course, as a newly promoted team, Hongyuan's performance is already good enough. After all, this year's league is crazy. The 3 top teams are all ants. Strong teams like Corning Tianlong are struggling between 4th and 10th. Look at Nanglo, which is still struggling in 11th place. Qixinfeng's overall strength this year is not bad. With 3 great players, Jie Xingyu, Tan Ran, and Jian Guangqian, they are capable of making a push for the top 3 positions. However, they also have some problems with running in and overall performance, so they always lose some games that they shouldn't lose. In this way, they often have some problems in the game, and it is normal that they are not ranked high. However, their results in recent rounds have been very good, and they can be regarded as having a fairly stable and outstanding performance. After stabilizing, such teams often perform very well. We can't take risks in this game. Anyway, the goal difference has been leveled. This game still has victory as the first priority, even if it is only a small win by 1 goal. Li Qing thought to himself. After this round, it will be the semi-finals of the China Cup. Tin He can have a good rest, while Fifan will play the semi-finals with Cantoning. In this case, what Tin He needs is to win steadily and then quietly wait for Fifan to make a mistake. When the 34th round of the league started, the game between Fifan and Tin He started at the same time. Two competitors started their games at the same time, which of course also caused extra pressure. After all, if the experience was slightly less, they would keep thinking about the other team's situation during the game, whether the other team was leading or losing. Although everyone knew that this was unnecessary and would not change the facts, people's thoughts were always difficult to control. It was also very normal to think about it even though they knew it was unnecessary. Of course, Team He's players would not make such a mistake, and Li Qing's would not make such a mistake. After the game started, they immediately devoted themselves to the game and kept putting pressure on Xinfeng in the midfield. Li Qing's kept directing the team's tactics and gradually compressed the opponent's space. Whether it was offensive or defensive, the Xinfeng players felt tremendous pressure. Damn, Team He has used all their abilities, but it's no wonder, they don't have to play in the China Cup, they can just focus on the league. Zheng Qi complained in the team channel. As soon as the two sides met, Zheng Qi and other god-level players immediately sensed Team He's determination. This grinding wheel-like attack is exactly what Team He is best at. This tactic may not necessarily lead to a big win, but it can better play to their level and allow them to win steadily. In connection with the previous few games, Team He played more actively and openly, but played more cautiously in this game. Xinfeng's god-level players immediately knew what Team He wanted. They wanted a cautious victory, and didn't think about what kind of results Fifen would achieve. It's really hard to deal with Team He like this. Let's fight them. The outcome is up to God. Zheng said helplessly. If they were to fight against each other, Xinfeng would not be afraid. It was nothing more than a fight of offensive. Xinfeng, which had 3 god-level players, was not afraid of any opponent. However, no team could compete with Team He in this kind of millstone-like tug-of-war offensive. Maybe Fifen this year could not lose in such a confrontation, but Xinfeng could not do that. The average level of Team He's team was quite outstanding, not to mention that they were all around Li Qing's. The whole team was like an arm and a finger. In terms of not making mistakes, no team could compare with him. This team was just like their core, calm, decisive, and did not reveal any flaws. Although Xinfeng often broke through the defense line with unreasonable attacks, no one thought that this was helpless. Team He chose the tactics that best suited him. Before Li Qing's retired, no other tactics could bring Team He enough achievements and glory like this set of tactics. As for the fact that sometimes some people say that Li Qing's can only bring the team to such a height, except for a few confused people who may be fooled by such remarks, most people sneer at it. Li Qing's current height is already rare, and it is normal to want to improve, but it cannot be at the cost of destroying the current height. Those who do so are really fools. Team He once had such hesitations, but they quickly reversed this idea. It must be said that Li Qing's personality charm played a big role in this. The players who stayed in Team He were all willing to attack around him. The problem of Team He in the past was that they found it difficult to find players with outstanding strength and willing to surround Li Qing's. Many of the so-called 5 tigers might not have reached such a height if they were not around Li Qing's, so this made Team He suffer repeatedly in the confrontation with Xinfeng. However, under Li Qing's careful training and patient team building, Team He this year finally completed such a task, and the level they showed in the game was finally better than before. Although Li Qing's was a bit unlucky, having met Lu Xiaoxin's Xinfeng before and now a strange team like Fifen, his hope of reaching the top was not great, but no one could deny their strength and level. Being born in the same era as a top team was a great misfortune, and even more unfortunate than this was probably meeting 2 such teams one after another. But Li Qing's never lost heart. In the millstone-like confrontation, Team He won the game, although it was only a small victory by 1 goal in the end. However, throughout the game, no matter what method Xinfeng used, it could not get enough opportunities from Team He. We are convinced in this game. Zheng couldn't help shaking his head and said to Li Qing's, and Li Qing's smiled. It depends on the result of that game, but we estimate that we will continue to chase behind them. With Fifen's current level, it is normal to beat Minfen, and it is unlikely that there will be mistakes. Li Qing's replied. Maybe they will make mistakes. Zheng said. You can't use common sense to infer a game at this time. Chapter 864. King's Style. Li Qing's didn't actually expect Minfen to stop Fifen, but he also knew that what Zheng said was correct. In the final stage of the league, common sense cannot be used to infer many times. It is not uncommon for strong teams to turn the tables on weak teams at the last moment. It can even be said that there are many. What Zheng meant was that as long as Team He continued to win and exert pressure, there would always be a chance. and as far as this game was concerned, Fifen was much stronger than Mingfen, but they were still inexperienced in the championship battle that started at the same time, and they had to be distracted by the semi-finals of the China Cup that was about to start. They might be beaten by Mingfen, who was fighting for relegation. However, soon after returning to the locker room, the Teen Head players learned the news from the other game. When they saw the score, the Teen Head players were collectively silent. Fifen didn't know what was wrong with him. He didn't give Mingfen any face in the away game and beat the opponent 8-0. This is the league with the largest single game win so far this season. Damn, are they crazy? Han Yiming said. They will definitely lose the next cup match if they play so hard, Juan Barrow said. Yes, they obviously can't stop and can't control their performance. Their state will definitely fluctuate next time, Du Qingfeng said. Several young players from Teen He were talking to each other, but the other players of Teen He knew that no matter whether the opponent couldn't stop or not, this time, the goal difference advantage was expanded to 7 goals, which would bring great pressure. It's not that these 7 goals are so important, but Teen He had been chasing all the way before, and it took a lot of hard work to tie the goal difference for several rounds, but Fifen expanded it to 7 goals again in one game, which inevitably gave others an impression, no matter how hard Teen He chased, the other party would just pull away again in one game. It's like a long-distance race. You worked hard and spent more than 10 minutes to catch up with the person in front of you, and then the other party suddenly accelerated and left you far behind again in a few seconds. The blow brought by that is not comparable to falling behind from the beginning. Although Teen He is mature, there are also some young players in the team. If they are hit like this, then Teen He's performance will be affected to a certain extent. However, seeing Han Yiming and his team's performance, they were not affected in this way, which also comforted Li Qing's. Did they deliberately let us catch up with the goal difference and then leave us behind in one breath to hit us in this way? Impossible. This kind of thing is too risky, and there is no need, but it's hard to say about Fifen's gang. These guys can do anything. Li Qing's thought in his heart. He had to admit that if the other party did it on purpose, then it would be like playing cat and mouse with him. However, if the other party really wanted to play cat and mouse, he might still have some places to take advantage of. Li Qing's is undoubtedly a person who thinks very carefully, but this time, he really thought too much. Fifen has never underestimated Teen He, nor Li Qing's. Of course, the same is true for Changfeng and Lu Xiaoshan. They will not underestimate these two powerful teams and these two great players. As for the 8-0 score in this game, it was completely an accident. As a relegation team, Mingfen was still very motivated in this game, but a map that was not favorable to them appeared. That was the map of the Battle of Pengqing that appeared before. Such a map is a competition of the overall pressure level and the self-control ability of the players, so such a map actually does not appear very often. If it appears in a strong confrontation, it will be very exciting. However, if the levels of both sides are clearly strong and weak, then the weak team will suffer a lot. Mingfen was also unlucky. No one wanted to encounter such a map. They resisted very fiercely at the beginning, but Fifen did not dare to relax. After all, on such a map, either the east wind overwhelms the west wind, or the west wind overwhelms the east wind. If you think you can relax, you may be suppressed by the weak team in turn. Once suppressed, it will not be easy to turn over. So Fifen can only attack with all his strength. Even if they will play in the semi-finals of the China Cup in 3 days, they dare not slack off in this game. Don't blame us, blame this map. We can only fight you desperately. Zheng Qi muttered in that team channel, and then shouted. Go. If you don't go all out, you will be pressured by the opponent. It's not that the opponent's strength is relatively poor. Even if we play worse, we can still win. On such a map, if you are not careful, others don't need to use any killing skills. They can just use the flying skills to push you into the hatred range of the Han army. So playing such a map, you really can't relax at all. In this way, Mingfen is even more miserable. Originally, they were not as strong as the opponent. As soon as Fifen became tough, they were immediately beaten to pieces. In the first half, they were able to fight back and forth, and finally fell behind 0-2. However, after the second half, their breath was released, and the Fifen players played better and better. They just couldn't stop. When the whistle sounded at the end of the game, they found that they had beaten the opponent 8-0. Oh, that's not good. We hit them too hard. How can we face them in the future? Zheng Qi said, taking advantage of the situation. Mingfen had nothing to say at the moment. They were not as skilled as their opponents. If they lost, they lost. They couldn't say that the opponent played too hard. At the press conference after the game, Fifen was very low-key. They thought that this game was just an accident. The difference in strength between the two sides was definitely not as big as the score showed. We were lucky to win 8 goals. There are still 4 league games to go. We have to win them all to ensure victory. Now is not the time to be happy. Such a statement is of course a bit hypocritical. However, in such a situation, saying such humble words can make more people feel that Fifen has a bit of the style of a king now. After all, a king needs humility to maintain his image. Considering that they have drawn 5 games in 34 league rounds and have already obtained 92 points, their results can be called crushing. If it weren't for Zheng Qi and Tin He being extremely strong, then they might have won the championship in advance. Now Tin He has 90 points and Zheng Qi has 85 points. Such a terrible points advantage is enough to prove how abnormal these 3 teams are this season. If everyone wins all the games, Fifen and Tin He will break the 100-point record, and Zheng Qi's points will reach 97 points. If this happens, this season will definitely be a memorable season in the history of the Chinese professional league. Such glory, of course, belongs to everyone, Fifen, Tin He, and Zheng Qi. But at this time, whether it is Fifen or Tin He, they are thinking about winning the next game. Although Zheng Qi has basically withdrawn from the competition for the league championship, they are now 7 points less than Fifen and 5 points less than Tin He. Such a gap is difficult to catch up, but they still have the opportunity to stop Fifen in the China Cup, and they will certainly not miss such an opportunity. Tin He followed closely in the league, so Fifen could not relax at all. In the cup competition, Zheng Qi was ready to give Fifen the final blow in the final. The situation of 2 against 1 had gradually emerged. For Tin He and Zheng Qi, they did not have to join forces to deal with Fifen, but the schedule gradually formed such a situation. The new powerhouse wants to rise, and it will be targeted by the traditional forces. For a while, many people sighed on social media, but no one thought that Fifen was treated unfairly, but this kind of thing was originally a routine. In a league, if there were originally 2 teams fighting to the death, then when a third team emerged, it would definitely be suppressed by both sides at the same time. This is just an instinct, not unfair. If a new powerhouse wants to rise, it will definitely hurt the interests of the old strong team. This is a sharp correspondence in itself. Both sides rely on their own abilities to grab, and there is no right or wrong. It is normal for Fifen's rise to hurt the interests of Zheng Qi and Tin He, and it is also normal for Zheng Qi and Tin He to suppress Fifen. But before being blocked by Zheng Qi, they still have to pass a level. Don't forget that we still exist. The heroines of Corning said so. Others may ignore these 3 opponents, but Fifen will not ignore them. Although they have achieved good results against Corning this year, if you calculate it, Fifen's results against Corning after its establishment are still slightly inferior. Although Corning is not a particularly outstanding team, they are the only team that can make Fifen at a disadvantage in mutual records. Facing such opponents, Fifen will certainly not relax their vigilance, and will not think that they will definitely be able to defeat these opponents. They will not think so. This semi-final is very important, because only after winning can we enter the finals. No matter which team we face, it will be very important. Of course, facing Corning, it is even more important. Our results against Corning have not been particularly good, and we must try our best to reverse this. Zheng Qi said so at the press conference before the game. His words were very ordinary and did not show anything special, but for the players at Fifen, they must win this game. Of course, Corning will not let them get what they want. Chapter 865. Corning's goal. For Corning, their performance this season is quite good. Being firmly in the 4th place is certainly not a particularly remarkable achievement. However, considering the particularity of this year's competition and the abnormal performance of the 3 teams, it is not easy for Corning to maintain a theoretical chance of winning the championship when it is close to the 30th round, and they are also very stable in the 4th place. It is indeed not easy to do this in such a season. For this group of female players, other teams in the league can only say the word admiration in their hearts. Their lineup is not the best. Although there are good players such as Yuan Xiao, she is the only real god-level player. Although Wenai Lily, Chang Er and Lin Yuan are all excellent, they still have a certain gap with god-level players. Although their overall strength is not bad, in the absence of god-level players, this lineup is much worse than Fifen Zheng and Tin He, even compared with Shen Huaxian and Tian Long Namguo. Which of these 4 traditional strong teams does not have 2 or 3 god-level players and a complete set of outstanding strengths? But the team that can follow closely behind the top 3 is this team with only 1 female player who is a god-level player. This is not admirable, it is a problem. This is because they have been working hard to improve their strength and play the game for so many years. Such outstanding performance is the best reward for them. Maybe they can't reach the top, but in this process, they have been working hard and moving steadily towards their goals. For a professional club, such performance is more important than anything else. Because there is only one champion in a year, but other teams still have their own goals to strive for. We have no chance in the league, and we still have to work hard in the cup. Whether Fifen wants to win the 5-time championship or not, they are now an obstacle for us to win to the finals, and we must work hard to defeat them. Yuan Shao said in the team meeting. But these guys are still quite difficult to deal with. And Nai Lily said. Not necessarily. Except for the 4 God-level players, the level of others is worse than that of the 4 of them. Although there are 7 or 8 good levels, the others are even worse, and they can't compare with any of us. Chandler said after thinking about it. That's right, this is Fifen's weakness, but this season, no one has taken advantage of it. Have you ever thought about why? Head coach Fu King smiled slightly and asked Chandler. Chandler blinked and shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. Because their personnel composition is very reasonable. In theory, their team of 22 players is divided into 3 distinct levels. 4 God-level players are at the first level, and below is Zheng Qi, Niao, Zheng Hai, Su Jin, Li Rui, Ban Yuanfen, Lin Fei, and Zheng Qi. Their operating level is not inferior to any top league player. Combined with their super attributes, the role they play on the field is better than that of ordinary Super League players, or even better. As for the other 10 players, as you said, even if their attributes are very strong, they are still a little worse than the Super League players. Their attributes are very good, but their operating level has obvious shortcomings. Fu King continued. But when they are on the field, their personnel combination has always been very reasonable. At least 2 of the 4 God-level players are on the field, and half of the 8 core players will also be on the field. If the God-level players on the field include offensive players like Shen Ruofei and Bin Shikai, then the ones on the field are basically auxiliary players like Su Jing and Zheng Qi. If the field includes defensive players like Liu Shbo and Zheng Qi, then counter-attack players like Li Rui and Wang Yuanfeng will be on the field. With them as the core and others as auxiliary, they will not be able to seize the weakness of the poor level of ordinary players. Even if you focus on those players and attack fiercely, their role on the field is just to assist. No matter how badly you beat them, it will be useless. Instead, it will make it easy for their main force to fall into the opponent's siege. So there is no way to deal with them. Yuan Shao asked in surprise. It's not possible to catch any loopholes. Fifen is too cunning. The flaws they revealed may be intentional. It's better to confront them head-on. Although we are a little worse than the top players, we are not much worse than them overall. After all, they are not very outstanding as a whole. They mainly rely on those outstanding players. Fu King said. As long as we are not afraid, there is still a chance of victory in a head-on confrontation. Corning's players knocked at one after another. If there is no loophole to exploit, then of course they have to rush forward and fight for a victory with their own performance and efforts. Corning has always done this. Not every game has any good tactics. Many times, if you want to win, you just have to keep fighting. Corning is very good overall, because it has attracted a large number of outstanding female players. Therefore, although they don't have many God-level players, there are many players who are better than the average Super League players. This kind of personnel composition is reflected in the game. Corning plays very fiercely at all times, and their players can always perform very well and fully display their level. This allows Corning to have an advantage at least for a certain period of time in that game when facing any team, and victory is often based on the foundation laid during this period. So although Corning's results are not stable enough, this is their shortcoming. Without at least 2 God-level players who are good enough, they will always have insufficient high-end strength on the field, so whether they can win the game often depends more on luck and performance. But it is also because of this that they can always win some victories that others seem to be unable to achieve, which is also a great thing. If we perform better this year and can introduce 1 or 2 good players in the transfer market, we will really have a chance next year. Fu King thought to himself. Although he was laughed at by many people because he was a male coach coaching a women's team, he was also an ambitious coach who wanted to gradually improve the overall strength of the team and achieve more owners. In the past 2 years, Corning has laid a good foundation. After introducing Liu Yuan, the defense line has been stabilized. However, it is not easy to introduce such outstanding players. After all, if you want to introduce them, you have to introduce God-level players or players close to this level. Otherwise, Corning can be said to be everywhere with second-level players. However, it is not easy to introduce God-level players, or even second-level pseudo-God-level players. It is easy for other clubs, but not easy for Corning. The reason is very simple. Corning is indeed special. Even if everyone has been downplaying this point, Corning is still the only team in the league that is dominated by female players. From the captain to the core, and most of the main players, they are all female players. Under such circumstances, it is difficult for them to let a male player have a high status. At best, it is Yuan. As an important player, he is not the core. And which God-level player is not arrogant? Even if you admit that Yuan Shao is a top God-level player, how many people would be willing to help Yuan Shao? This is not a problem of gender discrimination, but a problem of being unable to suppress strength. Yuan Shao is an outstanding God-level player, but among God-level players, he is only a mid-level player. Just like Jinlong Jiaozing, wasn't it because Xiong Fei was dissatisfied with him that he caused trouble for the boss? Everyone should be careful about this kind of thing. If you don't pay attention, once there is a problem, the performance of the entire team will be greatly affected. At least one season will be affected. It's not much, but the peak period of a top player is only a few years. Who can bear to waste a year? For a team like Canning, they don't lack outstanding players, but they lack top players, so such signings need to be more cautious. This is a test for Fuking, but Fuking is very confident. Judging from Fifan's performance this year, in the next few years, the top players will definitely change from being scattered in a dozen clubs to being concentrated in 6 or 7 clubs in the future, so that in the top confrontation, there'll not be only 2 or 3 teams playing. For a league, if there are only a few teams at the top, it is of course disadvantageous. Even if the league becomes clearly divided, there must be more strong teams capable of blocking the extraordinary. In this case, it is much easier for Corning to introduce outstanding players. With a goal, introduce 1 or 2 God-level players, give them a good status, and then merge them together to impact some owners. Fuking is very sure that the next season will definitely be a season of heroes. As long as it is a strong team, there will be a chance to impact the championship. It depends on who performs better and has better luck. Since there can be a champion, why can't it be Corning? This is Fuking's idea. This year, Corning has shown an extremely good state and level in the league. They have proved that they are one of the few teams that can compete with the top 3. Such performance is of course easier to attract outstanding players. The reason is the same at any time. Strong teams must pursue good players, and good players must also pursue strong teams. If you don't show your strength, others will look down on you. If you show enough strength, then those good players would rather give up some status and things to impact owners with you. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto a mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en sinisfuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas incredibles. Chapter 866 Opening. One of the semi-finals of the China Cup is about to start. The 2 teams are Fifan, who ranks first in the league, and Canning, who ranks 4th. This is a fierce battle. In the other game, Changfen, who ranks 3rd, faces Tianlong, who ranks 6th temporarily. Judging from the ranking, the gold content of the semi-finals this time is also quite high. Both of these confrontations can be called fierce battles between dragons and tigers, which are worth looking forward to. Above the stands, a spectator looked up at the sky, then turned around and complained to his partner. This commentator is far inferior to Mr. Yuan Fei. There is no way. It is said that the old man is old and has caught a cold these 2 days, so a new person was replaced. The companion replied. At this time, Yuan Fei was watching the broadcast of this game at home. He is indeed not young, in his 60s, and his health is not particularly good. So he caught a cold 2 days ago, his voice is a little hoarse, and he is also a little short of breath. Under such circumstances, of course, he can't comment well, so he can only rest at home. But rest is rest, and he still has to watch this game. The players of both sides have not yet appeared, and this will be the final arrangement in the locker room. Don't have any other ideas, just confront them head on. Our overall strength is not worse than theirs, and we also have outstanding individuals. If we continue to fight, we will have an advantage. Do you understand? In short, we must concentrate on the game and take every step carefully. Victory is ours. Zhu Shan said in the locker room. Like Fuking, he chose this tactic without any prior agreement, But Zhu Shan was confident in the strength of his team, while Fu King wanted to try his luck. This tactic often pays attention to the performance of the players. Fifan has more core players, and Kan Ning is stronger overall. The confrontation between the two sides on the field really depends on temporary performance. Obviously, both sides are very confident in the on-the-spot performance of their players. When the players of both sides came on the field, there was a huge cheer from the stands. Kan Ning originally had a lot of fans, and Fifan is now in a more glorious period. If the shouts of more than 10 million fans in the stands were not in the game, but in reality, I'm afraid that there would be some problems. Of course, everyone can enjoy this lively scene in the game without suffering any consequences. Contribute a good game. Zheng Qi extended his hand to Yuan Shao. Yuan Shao held Zheng Qi's hand. Of course, we have been looking forward to this game for a long time. We have the advantage in physical strength and energy. We also used a big victory to cleanse our swords. The murderous aura is very strong at this time. Zheng Qi replied. Yuan Shao smiled slightly and didn't say much. Both sides wanted to use words to create some pressure. Yuan Shao's words were very simple. They didn't have much pressure in the last round of the league. It can be said that they played casually on the court. Now their energy and state are at their best. Zheng Qi said tit for tat that there was no problem. We killed a lot in the last round of the game, just like a swordsman. Although there was a big battle before, his physical strength and energy were consumed. However, he who had seen blood had a stronger murderous aura. Neither side would be weak in momentum. Fifan would not think about any taboos in this game because there were other games to play later. What they have to do is to fight one game after another and try their best in every game. After all, there are only 4 opponents left in the league, and only 2 games left in the cup. Playing 6 games in a month is not a particularly stressful thing. Just grit your teeth and get through it. Relaxing at this time is irresponsible to yourself. After the game started, Fifan quickly launched an attack. The map of this game is Chibai. On the field that is in full view at the beginning, other methods are of course redundant. The only way is to attack head-on and decide the outcome through the individual level and overall performance of both sides. So Fifan didn't waste any time, but quickly launched a fierce attack. Since it is the beginning, therefore God-level players are naturally on the field, and the remaining 7 are also main-level players. In addition to goalkeeper by Senator, Ban Yuanfen, Su Jin, Niao, Zheng Hai, Zheng Shu and Lin Fei are the remaining players. This set of main lineup is also very scary. There are side raids, receptions, frontal advances, organization and assistance, and everyone's attributes are very strong. When ordinary teams meet them, they will naturally be at a disadvantage psychologically. If they want to win, they will not win in front of this group of people, but look for opportunities when Fifan starts to rotate. Corning's people don't think so. They admit that Fifan's lineup is indeed very strong. Even Chengfeng and Tin He can't come up with such a strong main lineup. However, Corning has never been a team that will retreat when seeing the opponent is strong. Corning's players may not be particularly outstanding in operation, level and attributes, but any Corning player is top-notch in courage and fearlessness. Without such psychological endurance, it would be difficult for Corning's players to get on such a stage. So in facing Fifan's fierce attack, they faced it head-on without fear. Focus fire from a distance, attack Su Jing. When the two sides were about to make contact, Yuan Shao shouted in the team channel. Although Su Jing and Niao were both female players they admired for being able to gain a foothold in the top league with their own abilities, it was obvious that the players of Corning would not relax at all on the field. Under the command of Inai Lily, several long-distance skills flew accurately towards Su Jing in succession. Su Jing was forced to stop moving forward. Liu Shibo, who was protecting her, rushed over and used his body to take several skills from the opponent, so that Su Jing was not disturbed. Su Jing was not only an auxiliary core in the offensive, but also a ball-controlling player, so the protection for her was always very strict during the offensive. Even if Liu Shibo was not on the court, there would be other defensive players to assist her. However, Kan Ning had no intention of killing Su Jing from a long distance. This was impossible. Any team would protect its auxiliary core closely. Maybe in a fierce battle, there would be a situation where they could not take care of it. However, if they were killed by a few long-range skills at such a distance, it would be a joke. Kan Ning's purpose was nothing more than to slow down Su Jing's pace of moving forward and make her more disconnected from her teammates. Su Jing moved slowly to begin with. In such a situation, she would often arrive at the battlefield later than her teammates in front of her. However, this was normal. She had already added the auxiliary skills in advance. The restorative skills would not delay things even if she arrived at the battlefield later. After being blocked by Can9 at such a long distance, the distance between her and her teammates in front was pulled even larger. If it was not Liu Shibo who was protecting her, Can9 might have used the teleportation skill to teleport 2 or 3 players to attack Zheng Qi in the next moment, trying to send the opponent's auxiliary out of the field first to accumulate advantages. However, with Liu Shibo by her side, Can9 did not think so. What they had to do was just to cut off Zheng Qi and other teammates first, and then bring more damage to the extraordinary attackers in a short period of time. Of course, Can9's auxiliary core followed up. A team with an auxiliary core and a team without an auxiliary core are two different things. Can9 wanted to play with such a time difference. The two sides began to contact head-on, and their skills collided with each other, immediately creating a dazzling light and shadow effect. Under the cover of light and shadow, an inconspicuous light shone, and the next moment, 3 figures appeared beside Can9's auxiliary core. As soon as she saw the 3 people on the other side, Can9's auxiliary core felt that she was probably in big trouble. Shinryu Fei, Zheng Qi, Bin Shikai. 3 god-level players served her alone, and Can9's auxiliary core felt that she was still very honored. In fact, Can9's protection of her was not bad. In addition to Lian Yuan's protection by her side, she was not far away from the attackers in front and could come to support at any time. But the 3 extraordinary cores did not give her any chance. Bin Shikai entangled Lian Yuan. Zheng Qi's continuous skills controlled the opponent's activity space, and then Shinryu Fei's fierce attack fell on her head without a single mistake. Although Yuan Shao and others had already started to defend at this time, and even their skills had been thrown over, Shinryu Fei and Zheng Qi still killed the opponent's auxiliary players first, and then turned around to meet them. In the process of killing just now, Shinryu Fei, Zheng Qi and Bin Shikai's physical values had dropped a lot. It was of course very dangerous to be surrounded by the opponent's wave of counter-encirclement. However, they relied on their own operations to not die in the first time. After supporting for just a few seconds, the recovery skills that fell from the sky began to fall on them. Zheng Qi had already rushed to the front line at this time and could directly use skills to support them. Wanting to hit Fifan out of touch, but Fifan took the risk to kill his own auxiliary core. Can9 suffered a lot of losses as soon as he came up. Having an auxiliary core and not having an auxiliary core are indeed two different things. Both sides had similar manpower and overall level. Fifan's strengths were limited. However, Fifan now had a core that could extend the lives of his teammates with low health at critical moments, but Can9 did not. This slight difference instantly determined the outcome of this confrontation. Can9's players were wiped out, and Fifan had 8 players left. They began to move forward quickly. Wang Yuanfen, the fastest player, was first blessed with various acceleration skills, and then was sent to the front court by Zheng Qi using a teleportation skill. When Wang Yuanfen appeared in the front court, Su Jing passed the ball to Zheng Qi, who quickly kicked the ball and sent it far in front of Wang Yuanfen. Facing the goalkeeper, Wang Yuanfen waved his hand to use a repel skill, and then sent the ball into the opponent's goal before the opponent came up. Fifan led by 1-0. Chapter 867. Ice and Fire. Fifan's players began to celebrate on the court. Although the confrontation just now was short, it was completely intrigue. Fifan played the forward strike back to the fullest. This extremely targeted tactic is certainly not something that can be arranged in advance. Zheng Qi and Bin Shikai's tactical sense at that moment showed the greatest effect. Corning wanted to cut off the connection between Fifan's attackers and assistants, but Fifan took advantage of the situation and killed their assistant core, thus gaining an advantage. After wiping out the opponent, he did not leave any chance for the opponent. A quick fast break, before Corning's players came out of the off-court cooldown, had already completed the goal. It's okay, we continue to attack. They are the attacking side, and they always have some advantages. Yuan Shao encouraged his teammates. This was not entirely for encouragement. The attacking side itself does have more advantages. Corning quickly launched a counter-attack. Hold on to their attack. In the first half, we have to seize every attack. After all, there are no other obstacles, understand? We have to do our best in defense. Zhu Shan was directing in the team channel, and Liu Shibo nodded. Although he was still a little unwilling that the defensor could only play a supporting role, Liu Shibo knew that as long as he exerted his own strength in the game, there would be no problem. After all, in the game, the value of a defensive player resisting an attack from the opponent is also equal to a goal scored by the team. Between offenser and defenser, one is to compete for the number of attacks and defenses, and the other is to compete for the effect of attacks and defenses. Defensor is also a very important link. This is a very simple and straightforward truth, but many times some people will go to extremes. Fortunately, Liu Xibo will not go to extremes now. Corning's attack is also fierce. These women have always played more bravely than men on the court. Coupled with the natural attentiveness and tenacity of women, their performance on the court is much better than usual. Therefore, Canning has always been a headache for many teams, but their performance has really improved in the past 2 years. With the maturity of Yuan Shao, the growth of Inai Lili and Chang He, and the joining of powerful players such as Li Yuan, Canning's overall strength has been substantially improved. Under such circumstances, their bravery and tenacity have truly reflected their significance. Fifan is very clear about this point. When Canning's performance improved in the past 2 years, it was also when Fifan was rising. Fifan suffered a lot from Canning, so in defending, their mentality was also very stable. 5 yards on the right, fill in. Speed up and rush forward, stop, add defensive skills, hold on. Liu Xibo began to constantly command in the team channel. When defending, he is often the only god-level player, and Fifan's main players with relatively outstanding strength are also mainly offensive. Except for Zheng Qi who is a defensive player, the others are offensive, so more often, Fifan's defense depends on Liu Xibo's command rather than others. However, Liu Xibo did not feel that he was too tired. He was not afraid of his heavy responsibility, but was afraid that his responsibility was not heavy enough. Young people always want to get more. In Fifan, he has the first command in Defensor, and can make Fifan's Defensor better through his command. Even if there are some problems in Defensor, no one will blame him. He has a heavy responsibility, but no pressure. This is the best growth environment for young talents. However, it is not easy to get such an environment. After all, even if the atmosphere in the team is good, the pressure from the fans can easily create pressure on the players. However, although Fifan is doing well now and is making an impact on the 5-time champion, their fans are actually very tolerant and will not complain too much negatively because of the players' mistakes, let alone attack. For example, at this time, there is nothing wrong with Liu Xibo's command, and Fifan resisted Corning's attack very seriously. However, there are always times when people cannot take care of them, and Corning's attack is also very distinctive. So in this way, after continuous attacks, Canning finally seized a mistake in Fifan's defense and played a beautiful annihilation war. The remaining few defenders were firmly suppressed by Canning. Canning never let go of such an opportunity. After continuous suppression, he scored a goal and tied the score. Canning is really good. Zheng Qi, who was about to play, sighed. But this game is a cup match. We don't have to rush to lead within 90 minutes. The other Fifan players who were about to play couldn't help laughing at the same time. This was really correct. In the league, because they couldn't play in a draw, when playing against a strong team like Nanguo, if the score was a draw, the pressure on Fifan players was still relatively large. They only relaxed a little when they were ahead. But now it's a cup match, even if it's a draw, they have to play overtime, so naturally there is less pressure. Attack, seize this opportunity to attack. Zheng Qi raised his arms and shouted after he came on the court. There was also a similar expression in Canning's team channel. Seize the opportunity to attack and try to block the opponent's attack. This is the tactic of the first half. On such a field, the victory or defeat can mostly be decided in the second half. Unless the gap in strength between the two sides is too big, it is difficult to suppress the opponent on such a field. But even if the decisive battle is in the second half, the first half should at least delay the opponent. If the opponent is left too far behind in the first half, then in the second half, there will be no way to catch up. The second half of the game is often uncontrollable, because the change of the ground environment will bring great variables to the game, so it is often more dependent on the player's improvisation and a certain amount of luck to determine the outcome. In the dialogue between the strong, the second half is certainly important, but the first half should also try to gain a certain advantage, so that there will be a buffer after the start of the second half. Just like gambling, if you don't accumulate some chips in the first half, it is easy to lose everything in the second half when you go all in. If you accumulate enough chips in the first half and have a lot of capital, then some mistakes will not be a big problem. Of course, everyone knows this truth, but it is a bit difficult to do it. But no matter how difficult it is, you have to do it. This is the case for any game. Fifan regrouped and launched an attack, while Canning began his own defensor. Unlike the previous confrontation, when Fifan attacked before, all their main players were on the court, and all of Canning's main players were also on the court. Now, the two sides began to rotate. Fifan only had two core players, Zheng Qi and Shen Renofei, on the court, while Bin Shikai continued to rest off the court. Half of Kanning's main players on the court were also replaced. Yuan Shao and Liu Yuan led a group of substitutes to confront Fifan on the court. In such a confrontation, Kanning should have some advantages. After all, Kanning is not as good as Fifan in high-end strength, but in the middle level in substitutes, their advantages are relatively large. Of course, such an advantage is only an advantage in personal level. Half of Fifan's players do have a certain gap in operation level with the top lead players, but their attribute advantages can make up for it a little. At the same time, they all compete around the core, so even if they make a little mistake, it will not have much impact. Fifan's attack is now relatively simple. After all, the wonderful tactical ideas and cooperation before are not something that can be played casually, nor can they be arranged in advance. This is a miracle created by the tactical concept and the team's performance in that moment. And most of the time, the attack still depends on the orthodox frontal advancement. The so-called orthodox frontal advancement is to hit hard, relying on mutual cooperation and operation to gradually break the opponent. The opponent has one less person, so of course you have one more advantage. Slowly the advantages accumulate, and then in the end it is like an avalanche to break the opponent's defense line. Of course, this is just to occupy the advantage in the front. The opponent's players will also continue to organize the defense line in front of the goal after returning to the court. So there are also more high-end frontal attacks, which is to control the opponent's health, try to kill most of the opponent's players in one breath, and then break through directly to score a goal, just like Fifan's first goal. The former is of course simpler, and the latter is of course more difficult. After all, it is not an easy thing to control the opponent's health. It is easy to be broken by the opponent in turn. It is difficult to do it without a certain level. The offensive lineup led by Zheng Qi and Shen Renofei actually does not have such strong control ability. They are good at breaking the formation. Shen Renofei took the lead and continuously launched attacks on the front. There were always people around him to support him so that the gap between him and his teammates would not widen. Shen Renofei certainly caused great pressure, but Zheng Qi, who seemed to disappear after the start of the game, brought greater pressure to Kanning's defense. Such a map can be seen at a glance, but it seems that a core like Fifan cannot be seen on the field. How good is this guy's ability to hide his figure? Relying on the light and shadow of skill collision, relying on the cover of teammates' figures, this can form a difference in perspective and create a stealth effect, but in a head-on confrontation, both sides have 10 people and 20 eyes. With such a large angle, it is almost impossible not to be seen. Zheng Qi did it. Of course, his figure is not always invisible, but most of the time, his figure cannot be seen, which will undoubtedly put Kanning's defense in a passive position. And in such a situation, Shen Renofei still led a group of people to charge and fight head-on. One was tough and the other was gentle. The pressure brought by the two people was simply like ice and fire. Chapter 868 Targeting for Fifan. When they were rotating, Zheng Qi and Shen Renofei didn't have many opportunities to partner. Most of the time, when attacking, either Bin Shikai was there or the three core players were on the field. Zheng Qi couldn't be invisible, and he had to come out to attack to attract firepower, so that Bin Shikai had more opportunities to exploit loopholes. As it is now, there are actually not many situations where only Zheng Qi and Shen Renofei are on the field, so it also gave Kanning an illusion that the cooperation between Zheng Qi and Shen Renofei is not very good. However, now, Kanning began to feel that the cooperation between these two people was even more uncomfortable. A Zheng Qi who didn't take action was more troublesome than a Zheng Qi who took action, not to mention that Shen Renofei's fierce attack could not be ignored casually, and most of his energy had to be used to deal with it. However, when he was fully engaged in dealing with Shen Renofei, Zheng Qi could appear at any time. A bomb that could explode at any time is always more stressful than a bomb that has already exploded. Because you don't know when he will appear, when he will take action, use his continuous skills to tear open your defense line, or kill one of your most important players. He's not going to target the captain, is he? And Lily, who was off the court, couldn't help but ask worriedly. How should I know? Chan shook his head. The players off the court, like the coach, could only watch the game from the perspective of their teammates on the court. The players on the court couldn't see Zheng Qi's movements clearly, and the players off the court couldn't see them clearly. However, in the defensive formation, the most important person for Kanning, besides the defensive core Liu Yuan, was the captain Yuan Shao. Who would Zheng Qi attack? This was really a topic that needed to be considered. The players on the court were also thinking about this question. Yuan Shao even deliberately moved his position forward, just to lure Zheng Qi to attack him. There was another consideration for doing so. In the case of defensor, Li Yuan played a greater role than himself, and it was better for him today than Li Yuan. Moreover, Li Yuan's position was relatively backward now. If Zheng Qi wanted to go deep into Kang Nine's formation to assassinate Li Yuan, Kang Nine really had countless ways to prevent him from going back. However, after Yuan Shao moved forward for a while, the person who attacked her came, not Zheng Qi, but Shen Fei. Shen Fei, who was leading the way, used 2 consecutive knockback skills to knock out the 2 corning players who were blocking Yuan Shao at the same time. This kind of knockback skill is actually quite common in the game, but at this moment, Shen Fei's momentum was like a huge army, and no one could stop him. Seeing Shen Fei rushing in front of him, Yuan Shao did not panic, even though Shen Fei's momentum was very similar to that person. As a god-level player, Yuan Shao naturally has her own pride. The number of female players in the league is actually not small. Although Corning is the only team with female players, basically all other teams have more or less female players. Thun, a team with only 2 female players, is actually a minority. Most of them have 3, 4, 5 or 6 female players in the team. The ratio of male and female players in the entire league is basically 7-3, which is not a particularly large distance. However, among the god-level players, female players are very rare. There are only about 30 players in the league who are considered god-level players, but among them, there is only one female player, Yuan Shao. This sometimes makes female players a little discouraged, but the selection of god-level players has always been fair, open and transparent, and no one can find any faults. Under such circumstances, Yuan Shao hopes to use her outstanding performance to prove that female players can also achieve outstanding results in the competition. In fact, she did it. When she became a god-level player, her reputation and score were basically at the bottom among the god-level players. Such a score proved that if her performance declined slightly in the future, she would leave the ranks of god-level players. However, she performed better and better, and did not fall behind when facing most god-level players. Through such performance, her ranking continued to rise. Now she is firmly in the middle of the pack, which is enough to make Yuan Shao proud. The reason why she was able to achieve such an achievement was not only because of her attributes and operation level. In fact, her attribute points were just over 800 points, and her operation level was only average among the god-level players. However, it was because of her resilience and courage that she would not feel any fear when facing any player. However, Yuan Shao knew that there was a player she was most afraid of in the league. That was Lu Xiaoshan. In terms of operation, Lu Xiaoshan was better than her, and her bravery and tenacity were useless in front of Lu Xiaoshan's domineering. Although she would not lose her courage as soon as she saw Lu Xiaoshan, every time Kang Nine faced Chainfen, Yuan Shao's performance would not be so outstanding. However, no one cared about this. There were too many top players who performed poorly in front of Lu Xiaoshan, and they didn't care about one more. But Yuan Shao knew how desperate it felt to meet a guy who couldn't resist no matter how hard she tried or how brave she was. This is Lu Xiaoshan's domineering aura, and it is also his unique aura, so Yuan Shao often feels lucky in her heart. Fortunately, there is only one Lu Xiaoshan, and fortunately, she is a few years younger than him, so there is still a chance. Lu Xiaoshan has cast a lot of shadows on his opponents, and Yuan Shao is not the only one. And now, Shen Fei's aura of rushing over is very similar to Lu Xiaoshan. So domineering, so arrogant, but it seems so natural, as if he is so arrogant. The consequences of such an approach are certainly not small. Yuan Shao's mind was shocked to a certain extent, which made her performance seem a little worse than usual. The so-called masters compete with each other, and a little difference will cause great obstacles. This is also that case in the football era. So when the two sides fought, Yuan Shao was at a disadvantage. This surprised the audience in the stands, because although Yuan Shao was not a crazy operator, her tenacity always allowed her to at least entangle the opponent when facing any opponent. That is, when facing a player of Lu Xiaoshan's level, she would appear to be obviously at a disadvantage on the court. And now, Shen Fei performed just like Lu Xiaoshan. This made many people sigh. No wonder Lu Xiaoshan valued Shen Fei so much at the time. This guy is indeed Lu Xiaoshan's best successor. Then they became worried about Yuan Shao, because from the statistics, Yuan Shao would not be at a disadvantage when facing any player who is good at frontal attack. At least she would be able to fight back and forth. But when facing Lu Xiaoshan, her performance would always decline significantly. This situation is quite common, so everyone just attributed it to the restraint of style. Now Shinryu Fei played the same as Lu Xiaoshan. Can Yuan Shao withstand it? In fact, Yuan Shao really can withstand it. Although her mind was shocked and she was quickly at a disadvantage, her tenacity began to burst out completely when she was at a disadvantage. She would always avoid the position where Shinryu Fei's attack was more powerful, and then bear less damage, and sometimes even take the initiative to meet the opponent's damage, just to prevent the subsequent enhanced damage from bursting out. Under such circumstances, although Yuan Shao seemed to have no chance to counterattack, he did not let himself be killed by Shinryu Fei's fierce attack. In the game, as long as you don't die at the first time, it is always easy to save yourself. Yuan Shao saved his life in this way and then welcomed the rescue of his teammates. After several recovery skills fell on Yuan Shao, Shinryu Fei knew that he could not kill the opponent. He began to withdraw, but Yuan Shao followed closely and entangled him in turn. Focus on him. Yuan Shao shouted in the team channel. If she didn't die just now, then Shinryu Fei, who seemed a little aggressive, would be in danger. She would rather go up and entangle Shinryu Fei before she recovered enough, just to seize such an opportunity. This is often the case in the game. When you want to kill your opponent, you often expose enough flaws. Corning's players began to focus on Shinryu Fei, and Fifen players also came to rescue one after another. The tug-of-war in the game was produced in this way. The two sides were tit for tat, and the competition was about basic operation level and team cooperation. Shinryu Fei continued to resist Can 9's concentrated fire-through operations, while Yuan Shao started a counter-attack, tightly entangled Shinryu Fei, making it impossible for him to return to his own formation. You must know that in a wave of attack and defense, ordinary players can be sacrificed. After they die, their teammates can come to support them in 10 seconds. Moreover, if only ordinary players die, it will not have much impact on the entire team. However, core players need to be adequately protected. They need to be on the field all the time. Once the core player of one side is killed and leaves the field, others often cannot support for long. Therefore, any team attaches great importance to the protection of core players. Others can die, but the core and the auxiliary cannot die. These are two basic requirements. Just now, Fifen wanted to kill Yuan Shao, but now Can 9 wants to kill Shinryu Fei. The two sides started fighting around this point. However, in the fierce attack, Yuan Shao began to feel that she had overlooked something. Then she immediately remembered. Where is Zheng Qi? In such a melee, both sides can be said to have taken out all their strength, but where did Zheng Qi go? The next moment, the mystery was revealed. Zheng Qi suddenly appeared beside Can 9's assistant. Then, with a combo, he took Can 9's assistant away. Then, Zheng Qi was taken away by the angry Can 9 players. However, without their assistant, they lost most of their health in this wave of concentrated fire and the coverage of extraordinary skills. Can 9, without its assistant, was defeated again. Chapter 869 Worthy of admiration. I didn't expect Fifen to target Can 9's support again. This is a very good idea. In the confrontation, the status of the support can be said to be similar to that of the core, and both need protection. However, in ordinary confrontations, no one will relax the protection of the support. However, after the two sides form a melee, the protection of the support will be reduced a lot. At the same time, the support must be closer to the battle group to use its recovery skills more effectively. In this case, Zheng Qi suddenly appeared and killed with one blow, instantly reversing the situation of the entire game. This is not a very rare tactic, but it is really rare to do it so absolutely like him, the commentator sighed and said. Although this commentator is not as good as Yuan Fei, there is nothing wrong with this commentary. Fifen's two attacks were both aimed at Can 9's support, and they also achieved very good results. This approach may be prepared before the game, but it is more likely to be a tactical decision made on the spot. It seems that they are going to target our support today. We should pay attention to it next time. Yuan Shao said in the team channel. Although they lost 2 goals, Can 9 would not be discouraged. In fact, they were all small opportunities, but they all found them. It shouldn't be the head coach's arrangement. It won't be so fast. It must be their players who made the decision on the spot. And Nai Lily thought for a while and replied. Yuan Shao nodded. As for who made the decision, it was obvious. Who else could it be except Zheng Qi? He should have been looking for opportunities, but he used the auxiliary as a targeted breakthrough point twice. It should be a coincidence. We can also target their auxiliary. Although Su Jing is very good at auxiliary, her reaction and life-saving ability are not very strong. If we target her more fiercely, she will not be able to defend. Yuan Shao said quickly. Corning's players knocked at one after another. Targeting the opponent's auxiliary is of course a good idea. Although Su Jing has never been a flaw in previous games, those who want to target her will often be counter-attacked by Fifan, but there is still a chance. Most of the time, Su Jing was far away from the battle group and was under strict protection. When the attackers needed to replenish blood, they would retreat so that Su Jing could replenish their blood before going forward. Although this was a bit complicated, it did not have much impact on Fifan because their attributes were very strong and high. Even if they had more physical fitness, they could make their physical fitness higher and more able to withstand the opponent's damage. This rogue style of attacking with one's own strength also had a very good effect. However, it was not without opportunities. When the two sides were really fighting in the most intense time, Su Jing had to get close to the battle group to play a role. Even if they needed protection and assistance, the assistants had to bear some of the risks they should bear. This was what a professional player should do. Yuan Shao meant that when attacking, he should try to make a melee, let Su Jing get close to the battle group, and then find a way to kill her, so as to gain an overall advantage and allow this attack to score smoothly. This idea, of course, was not a problem at all. After the restart, Corning quickly launched an attack. With the usual style, they quickly killed directly into Fifan's half and launched a fierce attack. In such a field, at least in the first half, the attacking side can take great initiative, that is, when I want to fight you, you'll definitely not be able to dodge. Because the purpose is not to kill the opponent, but to hit the ball into the opponent's goal, so in such a situation, if the opponent wants to attack, you can't dodge. If you dodge, you will watch the opponent send the ball to your goal. In low-level games, it may be a good idea to focus on defense in front of the goal, but in the confrontation between top teams, dense defense can only kill oneself. Of course, it will allow the players of our side to support faster, but after the activity space of our side is greatly compressed, the opponent's large-scale skills can play a much more important role than usual. The reason why it is not a problem for the lower leagues to do this is that in the lower leagues, there are very few players who have excellent personal life-saving ability and excellent ability to use large-scale skills. Such players are not easy to find. You will know it if you think about it. Such players are probably like the magicians in the legendary games in ancient times. They have great lethality but poor life-saving ability. If they are protected, their output is very strong, but they will often be knocked down by a knife in a melee. The games in the football era are basically in high-speed sports, so such players are of course difficult to appear. Because they are rare, there are almost no such players in the lower leagues. Even if there are, they will not become mainstream. In the Super League, such players are not rare. Because of their value, any team will have one or two such players. They may not play a big role in a head-on fight, but once they suppress the opponent, under the protection of their teammates, when they smash their large-scale skills all over the sky, no opponent can withstand such an attack. Therefore, in the Super League, the purpose of the game is often very clear: direct confrontation, suppress the opponent, and after suppressing the opponent, the large-scale skill players come on the field, force the opponent's defense line, and then score a goal. If you can't suppress the opponent, you must also attack from the front, force the opponent to retreat, and then gradually compress the opponent's space. In this case, many times the weak team simply doesn't know how to play, but the good thing is that the attacking side will always have an advantage, plus various map factors. The home court of the weak team will be a very important opportunity to score points, so that the weak team has more competitiveness. However, this also caused a consequence, that is, in the league, the weak team can still rely on the home map advantage to achieve good results, but in the cup competition, it is really strong and weak, because the map appears randomly. If the strength is a little worse, it is really a little worse. Therefore, the cup competition has always been the later the stronger the team, so Fifan's previous performance of entering the China Cup final as a Class A team and finally winning the championship was so surprising. This also proves from the side how important it is to suppress the opponent. Can 9 started to attack fiercely, and Fifan also immediately went up to meet him, led by Liu Shibo. Bin Shikai still did not play at this time, while Zheng Qi stayed on the court and started defense with Liu Shibo and others. This frequency of appearances is still relatively high, but it is normal. After all, it is not necessary for each player to play for 5 minutes and rest for 5 minutes. They only need to rest for a while off the court instead of playing the whole game. Therefore, the playing time of the core players is also a very particular matter. How to let the core players take turns to rest, while not affecting the overall performance on the court, has always been a headache for coaches. Everyone knows that it is best to stack the strongest lineup in the team, but the consequence of doing so is that in the second half, the players' state collectively declines, and they are beaten by the opponent without any ability to fight back. Moreover, a team of 22 people is useless, and it is necessary to rotate constantly, while training young players, and also let the already famous players get a better rest and extend their career life. Facing Corning's fierce attack, Fifen defended very steadily. Zheng Qi was just like an ordinary defensive player. Under Liu Shibo's command, he kept filling in positions. With his operation and overall attributes, he was better than ordinary players in being a laborer. But Corning's players also paid attention to his existence. After all, even if he was in everyone's sight, no one knew when this guy would suddenly go berserk and bring huge damage to the team, especially Corning's auxiliary corps. She had been killed twice by Zheng Qi. However, now the lineups of both sides were strangled together. She had to move her position forward so that she could better support her teammates. Although she was worried about dying, she was still fulfilling her duties. No one said much, and Corning's teammates also swore in their hearts that they would not let the auxiliary die again this time. Under Corning's attack, Fifen's defense line began to be gradually compressed. This shows that Corning's auxiliary corps also performed very well. After all, what the auxiliary corps has to do is to restore teammates in time so that teammates can attack without scruples. Whether the front line can be pushed forward often depends on whether a certain attack can be carried out thoroughly. This of course requires timely and accurate assistance from the auxiliary. Not only must it be comprehensive, but it must also be restored in the best way to make the performance of the entire team even better. The confrontation in the football era is like fighting a war. In addition to seeing whether the soldiers are brave and whether the command is proper, it also depends on how the food and grass is supplied. The auxiliary corps is responsible for supplying food and grass. After being targeted and killed twice in a row, the auxiliary corps often has some changes in mentality. However, Corning's auxiliary corps has maintained a normal mind, which is very valuable, and Corning has not been affected at all on both offensive and defensive. Corning is indeed worthy of respect. It was just a small team back then, but it has been able to support it until now and perform better and better. TSK, women hold up half the sky. This is not said in vain. Zheng Qi said in surprise. It's normal. There are always outstanding female players in every top team. Maybe female players are a little bit inferior to male players in reaching the top, but female players who can stand on this stage are even better than male players in persistence and tenacity. Chen Fen nodded and said. Chapter 870 Genius. Can Nine, who was advancing step by step, played their overall level very well. Although Yuan Shao was not on the field, she was more comprehensive and could play a big role in defense. On offense, with Anili and Chang He, Can Nine's offensive level was already very good. Although Can Nine only had one god-level player, they had many core players. This was also that characteristic of the football era team. There might not be those top players, but there would be 3 or 4 core players in the team, so that when they rotated, the level of the entire team would not drop too much. Anyone who did well in this aspect would have no problem in their performance even if there were no god-level players. If they did not do well in this aspect, even if there were many good players in the team, the result would have some ups and downs, just like this year's Nanguo. In order to highlight Sun Fei's status, the team did not have the second and third core players. Sun Fei had no problem on the field, but he was not made of iron. There would always be a time when he would leave the field. When he left the field, the opponent would take this opportunity to give Nanguo a good look. Fifen's approach was just imitating the approach of other teams before, but this approach seemed very effective. Can 9 is obviously the former. When Yuan Shao is not on the court, the quality of their attack will not decline. This makes Yuan Shao in better condition and perform better when he returns to the court. Fifen's defense line was gradually suppressed, and it was about to be suppressed in front of the goal. At this time, Can 9's players began to focus their attention. They knew that if Zheng Qi wanted to play some tricks, this would be the last chance. Otherwise, when Fifen's entire formation was suppressed in front of his own goal, then no matter what tricks he had, it would be useless. For teams with similar strength, if one side was suppressed in front of the goal, then it would be impossible to counter-attack again, and they would definitely be suppressed. Sure enough, Zheng Qi moved. He chose a very exquisite time period. Fifen's counter-attack was repelled. Before Can 9 could stabilize his position, he quickly jumped up and landed in front of Can 9's auxiliary corps. Sure enough, they are targeting our auxiliary again. And Lily cursed in her heart, and then her subordinates were not slow at all, and immediately threw out the skills they'd prepared. Teleportation skills. Chan and two of Corning's best players were teleported over by Lily at the first opportunity. Zheng Qi's jumping speed was very fast, but Lily's skill throwing speed was not slow either. In such a short time, it was impossible for Zheng Qi to kill Corning's assistant. This was simply impossible. However, the next moment, Lily opened her eyes wide. Zheng Qi jumped over first, and then Lily threw out her skill. In this case, she would of course look at the direction where Zheng Qi jumped. According to her calculations, Chan and the others would arrive at most 1 second after Zheng Qi landed. By then, they would rush over. Even if Zheng Qi's operation level and attributes were strong, they could only support it for a few seconds at most. However, just after Zheng Qi landed, a white light quickly flashed on his body. This was the white light of the teleportation skill. The next moment, when Chan and the others appeared beside the assistant, Zheng Qi had disappeared from the assistant and then appeared beside Lily. Then, a long-awaited blow skill was quickly thrown at Lily. Lily was unable to make any moves and was blown away, falling into Fifan's formation. The next moment, Zheng Qi also broke out from the Corning formation, and Lily had already disappeared. He actually wanted to target me. Lily, who came to the bench, couldn't help but yelled. We were also deceived. Yuan Shao comforted Lily helplessly. But even if I leave, the assistant is still there, Chan is still there, and we are still attacking. Lily still said in disbelief. It was precisely because she knew this that she didn't expect Fifan to be targeting her. However, what happened next made Lily and Yuan Shao speechless. After killing Lily, Fifan immediately started to counterattack. Niaohua, who came on the field at some point, used a series of large-scale skills under the cover of Zheng Qi. Although it did not cause all of Corning's offensive players to leave the field, it also winged them all. The most fatal thing was that their ball-controlling players were not able to protect the ball well. The ball was refreshed after the skills were concentrated. They actually came up with this idea? Lily looked incredulous. You are also that core of the field. Without you, the other players on the field will always be in chaos. They have already completed the substitution before. We were caught off guard and were covered by their large-scale skills. It is normal that we can't control the ball. Next, it depends on who finds the ball first, but we don't have an advantage in this regard, Yuan Shao said helplessly. Lily was also very helpless. She certainly knew why Yuan Shao said that they were not at an advantage in such a situation. On the map, everyone could see the football being refreshed. At the time, it would depend on who was faster, or which team the person with the highest individual level was in. The higher the level, the greater the possibility of grabbing the ball. Sure enough, the next moment, Zheng Qi rushed to the front. He was the first to find the location of the football, and then the first to accelerate and start sprinting. Corning's players on the field certainly would not watch him rush to the front. However, at this time, Zheng Qi, who was also on the bench, had thrown out several control skills, causing most of their players to stagnate for a while. The remaining few who could keep up were also stopped by the extraordinary players. Although they tried their best to throw out their long-range skills, Zheng Qi was more slippery than a fish. With the reminder of his teammates, he avoided the opponent's skills with a few dodges, and then got the ball first. After getting the ball, he continued to approach Corning's half-court. This was not to control the ball, but to counter-attack. This guy is too bold. I will be on the court soon. See how I stop him. Lily said angrily. He dare not come up. Anyone can calculate. He just entered the half-court. You can go on the court. 1-on-2. He still controls the ball and dare not use skills. He won't do that. Fu King shook his head. Let's prepare to start defensa. Fu King's words were obviously correct. After Zheng Qi rushed forward for a distance, he quickly moved 2 steps horizontally, without really attacking, and the Corning players who rushed back to defend did not dare to force him too much. After all, the extraordinary players had already come to support him at this moment. If you had been on the court just now, then none of our defensive players on the court at this time would be good at defensa. He just wanted us to make mistakes in a hurry. Fu King first let Li Yuan go on the court, and then said to Lily. Lily nodded. The players of Corning were originally focused on defensa. If she had been in a hurry to play, she would have been more focused on defensa. Although the players are often very comprehensive, in such a situation, if there is no one who is good at defensa, the possibility of problems in the defense line is too great. Fortunately, the coach is calm, otherwise, this Zheng Qi is really cunning. Yuan Shao sighed.
While sighing, she couldn't help but think of Shen Fei, who was so similar to Lu Xiaoshan. Fifan had a brave Shen Fei, a cunning Zheng Qi, an immovable Lieshbo, and a shrewd Bin Shiqiang. From the perspective of high-end strength, this combination is really the best in the league. No team can compare with them. If there were not many teammates who were dragging their feet as a whole, then there would be no team that could stop Fifan. However, this is also related to Fifan's specific situation. They are a newly established club, which can be said to have risen suddenly. Of course, their foundation is not very deep. It is good to be able to gather so many players, but relying on Zheng Qi's personal charm and other factors, they can quickly form compact power in high-end strength. In fact, these 4 god-level players are not god-level players. Zheng Qi, Shen Fei and Liu Shibo are only in their early 20s, far from the mature stage, while Bin Shiqiang is already in his 30s and has begun to decline. It's just that the talents of these young people are indeed a bit against the sky, which can completely make up for this. This game seems to face more difficulties. When Yuan Shao sighed in his heart, Zheng Thongli and Chen Fen, who were watching the live broadcast of the game in the distance, looked at each other in surprise. The tactical design just now was very exquisite. It was done in one go from beginning to end. If it weren't for the calmness of Corning's coach, Fifan would have been able to score again. Zheng Thongli said with some surprise. It was very clever. He retreated step by step first, taking into account the psychological pressure brought by the 2 consecutive kills of the auxiliary. Then Zheng Qi suddenly jumped to attack the auxiliary. The timing was normal, but too normal, as if he was delivering food to someone. He diverted most of the offensive force away from Enai, and then came to Enai's side and killed one of the opponent's core players. This approach seems to be meaningless, but the timing can play a very good role. He used the sudden advantage in numbers to control the opponent in an area, and then used large-scale skill bombardment to refresh the football. Zheng Qi accelerated to get the ball and pretended to attack, making the opponent's offensive players in a hurry. Although it was only half successful, it was also a good effect. Chen Fen nodded and sighed. This improvisational tactic would not have been arranged by the coach in advance. Could it be that Zheng Qi came up with this tactic on a whim? This level is not inferior to Li Qing's. Zheng Thongli sighed. I know my son is very capable, but I didn't expect him to be a genius. He has a strong learning ability, so his command ability on the spot is even better. Chen Fen nodded. He may be a little worse than Li Qing's now, but as he accumulates experience, he will only become stronger and stronger. Boss, you really gave birth to a genius. If I had to give birth, it would be me. The credit is all on me. Yi Qing patted her chest and said proudly. Zheng Thongli and Chen Fen were both speechless. Chapter 871. Lucky. When Chen Fen sighed, Li Qing, who was watching the game, was also a little speechless. As a top tactician, he could certainly see how exquisite Fifan's series of tactics were. Although if it is reversed, any player, even a senior fan, can come up with such tactical details, it is different to be able to come up with targeted tactics and use them in the first time when the details on the spot are constantly changing. Apart from himself, Li Qing has not seen anyone who can constantly complete such tactical arrangements. Although every player who is good at on-the-spot tactics can often use such tactics, there is a difference between being able to use them and always being able to use them. The reason why Li Qing is considered the first tactician in the league, and also the only one, is because he can always complete such tactical arrangements on the court through his own command, so the team here can always steadily play a level stronger than its real strength in the game. This is not an easy thing. Li Qing knows how difficult it is to do this. He has paid a lot to be able to do this, and now, Zheng Qi has shown his level, or potential in this regard. The 2 consecutive kills of the opponent's assistant before, plus this time's counter-attack, are enough to prove that Zheng Qi has the ability to continuously carry out targeted tactics. More importantly, he is also able to string these targeted tactics together. Most people arrange tactics, and then they are done, and they have to start all over again next time, while Zheng Qi can easily use the things left over from the previous tactics, and the continuous small tactics can be combined into a big tactic. This ability is the key. Thinking of this, Li Qing took a deep breath. If he can't suppress it this year, he will be even more unable to suppress it next year. After all, he is getting older and older. Even if his characteristics will not degenerate rapidly because of his age, his energy is still a little weak. If Fifan can be stopped this year, then Fifan may lose many outstanding players next time. However, Li Qing knows this truth, and he has no other good way. Fifan is still 2 points ahead of Tin Head in the league, and there is no chance to play against each other.
In this case, Fifen doesn't need to look at Tin He's face if he wants to maintain the 2-point gap. They just need to win 4 more games. Now it seems that only in the cup competition, it depends on Zheng Qi. Zheng Qi's overall level may be a little bit worse than Tin He, but their burst of combat power is quite strong. In other words, in a marathon, Zheng Qi may be left far behind by Tin He, but in a 100-meter sprint, Zheng Qi can completely defeat Tin He. With Zheng Qi's level, it is still possible to give Fifen a good show in the cup competition. We can only catch up closely and put more pressure on them, and then see if Zheng Qi can stop Fifen in the final. Li Qing's thought to himself. This approach is obviously effective. After all, the China Cup final is between the 37th and 38th rounds. As long as Tin He is not won by Fifen in advance at the time, it will be enough to drag Fifen to the last moment. Under such pursuit and pressure, how long Fifen can hold on, I'm afraid that even Fifen himself can't think of it. Who can say that they will not collapse? While Li Qing was thinking, Fifen's attack had suppressed Can Nang. They gradually pressed forward, and then gradually rotated, replacing Shen Ruofei and other attackers and Su Jing one by one. Of course, it is necessary to pay attention to these details when substituting in battle. Fifen did it perfectly in the details. The progress is really fast. Li Qing sighed. Fifen caught many people off guard because of the advantage of attributes in the first-class league and when they just entered the Super League, but they still had many problems, especially the gradual substitutions in this kind of game, which was a great test of basic skills and overall level of detailed operations. They still had great deficiencies at the time. After all, these small aspects can better reflect the foundation of a team. Fifen at the time was obviously insufficient in this aspect. Even at the beginning of this year's league, there were still some flaws that could be used. But now, they have been able to achieve almost perfect in these details. This is of course a kind of progress, a rapid progress. Fifen's players are not very good at operation, but they at least have one advantage, that is, they are all very obedient. So in terms of following orders, they're undoubtedly first-rate. After commanding one game after another, Zhu Shan is also making progress. Zhu Shan is a head coach who is good at on-the-spot command, but he is only good at this. In terms of overall quality as a coach, he is still far behind those top head coaches. At least in terms of team formation, he seems very lackluster, otherwise he would not have coached a Class A team like Canton for many years, and he has not been able to get the favor of the Super League team. So he actually accumulated experience in the Class A League, and underestimated the difficulty of the Super League, which caused some problems in his command last year. However, one good thing is that he does not need to worry about Fifen's team formation, because Fifen often catches the basket and it is a dish, and this aspect is basically still controlled by Meng Fan. Meng Fan will ask Zheng Thongli for help from time to time. Although Zheng Thongli has been away from the front line for many years, he still knows a lot of people and is familiar with the trends in the league. Bin Shikai-Ang's joining is inseparable from his help. Of course, Zheng Qi does not know this. Under such circumstances, Zhu Shan is also constantly improving. He is a head coach without too many ambitions, otherwise he would not have stayed in the position of head coach of Canton for so many years. Since he does not need to do much in team formation, he puts all his attention on the spot command of the game. After such a long period of progress, he can already do these basic skills, which are not inferior to any top coach. In the game of the football era, the role that the coach can play is often not particularly large. For a top coach, on-the-spot command is not actually the most important, because many times the coach cannot command in a short time. What can be done is the timing and skills of substitutions, and these things have an upper limit. In addition to on-the-spot command, the real top head coach, in addition to on-the-spot command, the biggest role is in team formation and training players. For example, Chen Fei is such a top coach, buying players, training players, this makes his status in the league always very high. Even if Luo Qishuan and Zhou Ming have better results and greater fame in recent years, it is difficult to suppress him. So if it is only used to command the game, Zhu Shan's current level is enough. With the gradual substitutions, Fifen quickly formed enough suppression. They gradually suppressed Corning in front of their own defense line in the head-on confrontation. Fans familiar with the game know that once suppressed, losing the ball may not be far away. Corning certainly does not want to be suppressed by the opponent. However, when it has been suppressed, there are not many means to counterattack. Although Corning replaced several offensive cores and wanted to force a counterattack, it was hit by Fifen. After several cores left the field, others could not resist Fifen's fierce attack and could only lose helplessly. 3-1, Fifen expanded the lead. This is undoubtedly a great advantage. There is still a lot of time left in the first half. If Corning cannot hold Fifen as much as possible in the remaining time, then they will hardly have a chance to win in the second half. Even if the random changes in the terrain will often be in their favor, the difference of 2 goals is not so easy to catch up. This is also that charm of this map. If you want to win more stably, then get enough advantages in the first half and minimize the influence of luck in the second half. Of course, Can9 didn't want to just surrender, so they quickly launched a counter-attack, trying to get back a point. At this time, Zheng Qi had already gone off the court to rest. He had been playing continuously before and was indeed overdrawn. Bin Shikai was on rotation. Although he was better at attacking, he might run into the opponent's flaws when defending. Once he exerted his metaphysical offensive ability in such a situation, it was often more important than scoring a goal in the offensive. After all, with his characteristics, once he found a place that could be used, he could finally make this attack a success. In defensa, that is, he could counter-attack while stealing the ball. Of course, this opportunity was rare, so Bin Shikai participated in the defensa, and more of his experience and operation was used to help his defensa. Can9 didn't want to be counter-attacked by the opponent again. If he was blocked from attacking once and the opponent scored a goal, then it would be 2 goals short. Who could bear this? So this time they were brave and cautious at the same time. Several core players took turns to attack and suppress Fifen's defensa. At the same time, they didn't reveal any flaws. It was a wonderful attack, almost textbook-like. Zheng Qi off the court couldn't help but admire. Yes, it was wonderful. There are really many strong teams in the league, and these teams are all excellent. Shinryo also nodded. For them, their careers can be said to have just begun, and they can face so many top teams. This is also a kind of luck. Can9 on the court also seemed to be lucky. After suppressing Fifen, they began to advance step by step, steadily suppressing Fifen, and then looking for opportunities. Finally, after seizing an opportunity, they successfully scored a goal. 2-3, now they're only 1 goal away. Chapter 872. Gap. Can9 was only 1 goal away from catching up, which made Can9's fans excited. They began to shout loudly, hoping that Can9 could stop Fifen's attack in the next time, and then counter-attack again to tie the score. However, Zheng Qi, who was watching the game, shook his head slightly. Can9's situation was a bit difficult to get off. Although their attack just now was perfect, this kind of attack would consume a lot of energy. The low tolerance rate alone was enough to prove that such an attack itself was a very energy-consuming approach. This kind of attack, used at the critical moment to score points safely, would not matter, but if used in such a situation, Can9's performance would definitely be affected. You must know that on such a map, the second half is the most important to concentrate on the game, because the ground may change at any time. If you are not careful and get caught up, it will lead to the failure of the entire team. Although Fifen played very cleverly in the first half, they actually did not concentrate on the game, because in such a game, the first half needs to save energy. But Zheng Qi also knew that Can9 could not tolerate any more problems in the attack, otherwise the morale of the whole team would be seriously affected, so they had to do this. You have to know that drinking poison to quench thirst is often necessary. Because of this, Fifen has already occupied enough advantages invisibly, which is not a good thing for Can9. This is an individual victory, Zheng Qi thought in his heart. Obviously, during this period of time, Zheng Qi's performance became the key. It was his several shots that made Can9 unconsciously at a disadvantage, so he was forced to perform more perfectly in this attack, which would affect the performance in the second half. I hope he didn't do this on purpose, otherwise, this kid is growing too fast. Zheng Qi said in his heart. In Zheng Qi's view, Zheng Qi's growth rate is simply amazing. It's not that he underestimated Zheng Qi's talent, but Zheng Qi knew that if he wanted to have such a like performance in tactics, it was not possible to do it by talent alone. Just like a person can be very smart after birth, can learn everything, and have an extremely high IQ, but such a person, at the age of 20, in terms of the richness of knowledge, he must not be able to compare with a well-educated old scholar. Smart and wisdom are different. Smartness can be innate, but wisdom requires acquired accumulation. In Zheng Qi's view, in the era of football, operating these things can rely on talent, or even can only rely on talent. Without the talent for operation, no matter how hard you practice, you will never be able to reach the level of a god-level player. However, targeted tactics require wisdom, that is, acquired accumulation. Only when you play more games and have rich experience can targeted tactics be more effective. This can even be said to be an unquestionable thing. But does Zheng Qi now have such a command with a big picture view? Li Qing's really didn't believe it, and in most of the games, Zheng Qi didn't show such an overall tactical level. It can only be said that he was lucky in this game. However, Zheng Qi knew that this set of tactics was really arranged by him on purpose. The 2 months of participating in classical football brought him a lot of help. Although his game state was greatly affected after those 2 months, and it was not until now that he gradually recovered. In fact, such efforts were not in vain. It was not just as simple as winning a World Cup championship. Although classical football and football era are now almost 2 different games, and the game methods are also very different, in the final analysis, there is still not much difference in essence. Use your stronger points to attack the opponent's weaker points, and temporarily form a situation of more against fewer in a local area. These are what these 2 games need to do. Because when personal abilities are getting closer and closer, it is very important to play more against fewer in a local area. At the same time, because of the improvement of physical fitness, the time left for you to play more against fewer is also getting less and less. In this case, you need to find the opponent's flaws in the shortest time and then respond in a targeted manner. Such training is also applicable to the game of football era. Zheng Qi's previous downturn was not only due to his condition, but also because he needed to combine the 2 better. Now he can combine the 2 very well. The feeling and instant decision-making ability he developed in the classical football game allow him to play a good role in the football era. Although this approach is not always effective, even if it is just a few more times in a game, it can bring great help and benefits to Fifan. Li Qing's is also clear about this. Fifan has excellent points, but they still have many shortcomings and places that can be used before. Now, they have gradually made up for these places that can be used, and at the same time, they have added some more excellent places. Such a team is often the strongest. In the long league, they seem to be more and more powerful, which makes Li Qing shake his confidence a little. Can such a team really be stopped? But soon, Li Qing's changed his mind. After all, even the strongest team is prone to lose 1 or 2 key games due to some problems, and Fifan will not be any different. At this time, of course, he can't be discouraged. Only by continuing to persevere can he seize the time when Fifan makes mistakes. He continued to watch. Even though he had watched many Fifan games this season, he would continue to watch. Because it seemed that Fifan would show something new in every game. Young teams are so terrible, because when they perform well, they often make rapid progress in every game. Only young players and young teams can do this. Li Qing's didn't care about it, because the young players he trained also hit such rapid progress. Han Yimin, Juan Bao, Du Qingfen, Gu, who have now become the main core players of Team Head, all hit such rapid progress. We are also improving. This season we also started low and ended high. Li Qing's thought to himself. On the court, Fifan started to counter-attack. They did not use a very rigorous offensive method, but continued to attack more unrestrainedly. Before the second half of the final, they were saving every bit of strength. This situation was brought about by Zheng Qi. His several tactical arrangements allowed Fifan to gain an advantage, and in these processes, it was only him who was really consumed, not the entire Fifan. If Canning wants to make up for this gap, it requires the joint efforts of all. This is Fifan's advantage, a kind of momentum they gradually formed. At this time, Zheng Qi was still resting off the court, Shen Ruofei came on the court, and Bin Shikai continued to stay on the court. Fifan was still leading by 1 goal, and they could be more cautious when attacking. Gradually suppress, do not rush, look for opportunities. In short, with Shen Ruofei and Bin Shikai on the court, there is no need to worry about not having opportunities. Shen Ruofei will attack strongly, and then Bin Shikai will seize the opportunity, and maybe he will be able to score a goal. It may take a lot of time, but they're leading now, and it doesn't matter if they spend time. They can't wait until the end of the first half to score a goal, so that they can lead by 2 goals and enter the second half. On such a map, a 2-goal lead is already quite huge. We should not be anxious. Don't forget that Bin Shikai is on the court. This person can always seize the opportunity. Even if we fall behind and enter the second half, we can't be anxious at this time. Yuan Xiao said in the team channel. And Nai Lily raised an objection. Captain, if we delay, they might be happier. We can play more aggressively. Even if we lose the ball, we will attack next. At least we can try to score as many goals as possible. This is more proactive. Lilai's idea makes sense. We can do the same. Fu King agreed. Corning immediately reached a consensus and prepared to force a counter-attack. taking the initiative to disrupt the opponent's plan. Even if we lose the ball, at least the opponent will not have the opportunity to delay time. The leading party always wants to delay time, not to mention that they are in the initiative of attacking. Corning began to counter-attack. They found an opportunity, and then Enai Lily took the lead in the front, and Chana assisted by her side, and they started to counter-attack from the side. The opportunity they found was still very good. When Shinryu Fei launched a frontal breakthrough, they launched a counter-attack from the side and cut off Shinryu Fei and other extraordinary players at once. However, just after they cut off, Bin Shikai appeared in their formation for the first time. Relying on his own operation and the supply of his teammates behind him, Bin Shikai stopped the opponent forcefully, and at this moment Shinryu Fei did not turn back to defend, but continued to rush forward. At this moment, Kanming's defense line was weak. Their large forces were restrained by Bin Shikai and other Fifan players. For a while, no one could stop Shinryu Fei. Shinryu Fei directly broke through Kanming's defense line and then knocked Kanming's goalkeeper far away. At the same time, Su Jing's long pass in the backcourt directly crossed the entire battlefield and fell in front of Shinryu Fei. Shinryu Fei did not stop the ball and directly volleyed and kicked the ball into the empty goal. Fifan quickly scored a goal and expanded the lead to 2 goals again. Did they even calculate our counter-attack? This is impossible. Kanming's players were a little shocked. Li Qing shook his head helplessly. Maximizing one's advantage is also a feature of Fifan. Kanming is outstanding and hard-working, but compared with Fifan, their gap has been clearly shown. CSS Kushanda Western Novela on Canal Distinta Mundo Fanfic Novelas, Significat Lo Descarga and Y Subir and Sinisfuet Sot Invitamus Cordialmente Visitar Nuestro Canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 873. Rogue. The gap between Can9 and Fifan lies in the gap between top players. Everyone knows this. Compared with Fifan, who has 4 top core players, Can9, who only has 1 god-level player, is indeed much worse. However, everyone can also see that Can9 still has some advantages in the level of other players, which is also the biggest confidence of Can9 to fight against Fifan. However, the previous games have proved that Fifan can often hold Can9 back. Even when they have a lot of substitutes on the court, they can still hold the game with the leadership of 1 or 2 core players, while Fifan can always rely on the outbreak of a certain core player to obtain some details and factors to break the deadlock. When they accumulate such advantages, they can continue to contain their opponents by relying on the performance of the core players. When their strength is obviously superior to theirs, such tactics are almost unsolvable. There are 4 core players of similar level to them to entangle the 4 of them, so that they can play an overall advantage. Li Qing's thought in a bitter and amusing way. This is of course a good way to absolutely suppress Fifan, but is it possible? Fifan was able to gather these 4 because they were old and young, and they were also excellent among the god-level players. It was almost impossible for other teams to gather such a lineup. You have to know that even in the past 2 years, when Chengfen was at its peak, the only truly offensive god-level players were Lu Xiaoxun and Shinryu Fei. Fen Tu and Jian Guangqian were a little worse. Wen Xiang was also a god-level player, but he was more of a supporting player. Moreover, Shinryu Fei had just debuted at the time and was far less mature than he is now. However, Chengfen at the time was much better than Fifan now, but even such a powerful Chengfen was tricked by Fifan. It is almost impossible to gather such a strong team now, at least this year. Let's see if Chengfen can stop them in their finals. Can9, now he can only interfere with them for a while. Li Qing thought to himself, but he still had confidence in Can9. Can9 and other players, apart from other things, definitely have tenacity and fighting spirit. Even if they have already lost, they will definitely fight with Fifan to the end. However, in this way, the best teams in the league will collectively deal with Fifan. Thinking of this, Li Qing also felt a little ridiculous. This team has only been established for less than 4 years, but it has already made such a big move. It takes the whole league to stop them. However, thinking back on the process of Fifan's rise, Li Qing also felt that it was only a matter of time for such a team to rise. Although their advantage in creating characters in the new era has begun to weaken, as long as they wait patiently, they will definitely become stronger. In other words, they have already occupied a great advantage at the source. It is only a matter of time for such an advantage to be reflected in the performance of the first-line team. Li Qing shook his head. Fortunately, the days of these core players sticking together will not be too long. Other teams will always have a way to survive. In the next league, there will probably be a situation where multiple teams will besiege for fun. At the time, the league will be more lively, and each team will work hard to move forward. Otherwise, they will be like Shenhuan and Guoxinfen, because they can't keep up with the pace of other rising teams, and gradually become mediocre from the previous top teams. I can't let Teen He remain mediocre. Li Qing's took a deep breath and turned off the live broadcast channel. There was nothing interesting to watch in this game. What he needed was to find a way to continue to strengthen the team. Even if there was no chance this season, he had to fight for the championship next season. Anyway, for professional players, a failure in one season is definitely not a permanent failure. They still have a long time to fight for it. Even if they fail temporarily, it doesn't matter. Although Li Qing's is close to 30 years old, his ambition has not diminished. Moreover, as a player like him who is a supporting core, his condition will not decline immediately. Even if it declines, he can retreat to the second line to assist Li Qiang and let him become the new core. It is enough for him to check for leaks and make up for the shortcomings. He has great confidence that he can keep Teen He's outstanding performance for a long time. Even if he can't always win the championship, he can always stay in the ranks of strong teams. After a few years, or even more than 10 years, Teen He's status has been established. For a player, this is also a great honor. Li Qing's did not watch this game, but the game was still going on. Everyone is the protagonist on their own stage, but after they go out, the stage continues and never stops. After being patiently suppressed by Fifan, Corning wanted to play, but they couldn't, and the opponent quickly scored a goal. After Corning started to counter-attack, he was also subjected to Fifan's more rigorous containment attack. When Corning launched this attack, there was still enough time, about 10 minutes, but in the following time, Corning was intercepted fiercely by Fifan. They kept intercepting in the midfield, and even divided into several small teams, with 1 or 2 people taking action. They were not afraid of dying, as long as they threw out the skills they could before dying and caused enough damage to the opponent. This was also a very effective tactic. Fifan made full use of their attribute advantages. You must know that such damage can certainly be quickly recovered through the skills of the auxiliary core, but you must know that recovery skills also have cooling. An excellent auxiliary core often needs to keep all his auxiliary skills sufficiently cooled. At the same time, when using skills, how to distribute them is also very particular. Small skills are used on teammates with less damage. When teammates instantly huddle together, they can send out large-scale recovery skills. Even whether the skill recovery effect will be interrupted, or when to use what skills, all of these are very particular. So don't think that the auxiliary cores are all restorative hero cards. One hero has 3 skills, and a total of 30 skills may seem like a lot. However, how to use them smoothly is also a science. How to keep the skills cool and switch has always been a difficult problem. If Fifan continues like this, their progress will inevitably be greatly affected. At the same time, under the involvement of Fifan, time has passed by. Corning can advance in groups, but it is easier for the opponent's large-scale skills to take away more physical value. Moreover, some large-scale skills can take away most of the player's physical value in one wave, which requires more care. Their physical value needs to be kept at a safe line at all times. Such maintenance will make the auxiliary core's skill cooling always not in the best state. This is not a big problem, but when the two sides have a large-scale collision, if a skill is not cooled enough, it may be a huge problem. Moreover, Fifan is now frequently deploying troops. Now it is not long before the end of the first half. They can completely bring out the strongest lineup in the last wave of defensa, which requires keeping the recovery skills cool. So every time they were attacked by the opponent, Corning needed to recover, and then wait for the skill cooldown to get better before moving forward. They didn't dare to move forward while waiting for the cooldown. What if the opponent suddenly launched the final decisive battle in the middle of the road? Although the map was clear, the existence of the teleportation skill and the stealth skill could form a continuous surprise attack. Corning had already suffered a lot from the endless small tactics and sneak attacks of Fifan. Now of course, they didn't dare to move forward. In this case, even if Corning was very resilient, they were still entangled and had a headache. It took 3 or 4 minutes for Corning to attack the midfield. You know, although the entire venue is very huge, if a professional player is at full speed, it will take less than 10 seconds to get from the front of their own goal to the front of the opponent's goal. Their overall recommendation took 3 or 4 minutes to cover such a distance, which is enough to prove how many obstacles they encountered along the way. When they met most of Fifen, it was almost unsurprising that they met Fifen with all the main players. Fortunately, Corning was well prepared for this. In the process of advancing, they gradually completed the substitutions. Although they were not all the main players now, several core players were on the court, which was equivalent to all the main players. Under such circumstances, the two sides began to compete. The attacking side must have an advantage, but Fifen relied on the temporary overall advantage and began to constantly confront Corning. In terms of the overall team, Fifen was weaker against many teams, but if we only look at the main lineup, except for Changfeng and Team Head, there is really no team that can compare with them. Even Corning is slightly inferior. Although such an advantage is not enough for them to fight back, it is enough for them to support Corning's attack during this period. Corning was aware of this, but it was useless to see it, whether it was Fifen's interference before or the direct confrontation now. Their intention was very clear, that is, to use rogue tactics to delay time, but you had no way to stop them. Before, when Fifen attacked to delay time, you could still play more actively. Even if you lost the ball, you still had enough initiative, but now, you can no longer play more actively, and if you are more active, it will easily reveal a flaw and Fifen will seize the opportunity to push back. The opponent has Zheng Qi and Qi, two good players who are good at taking advantage of the gaps. Corning began to feel helpless about this almost rogue style of play. Although this style of play is rogue, it is based on Fifen's overall strength. Such an advantage is unshakable. Chapter 874. Simple tactics. For Fifen, they have no psychological pressure to adopt this almost rogue tactic. Although Fifen's players are still very young overall, their mentality is already very mature. They have experienced a lot from the amateur league to the top league. The anxiety and joy of upgrading, the pain of missing the championship, the ups and downs, the taste of life, although they will not taste all of them in just a few years, but in the competitive world, most of the Fifen players have tasted it in the past few years. This makes their mentality very stable, even cold. As long as it is within the rules and can achieve the goal, they will not have too much psychological pressure to do anything. Now Fifen has a 2-goal lead. If they persist until the second half, that is a real advantage, and of course they need to grasp it well. They also succeeded in doing this. Until the whistle sounded at the end of the first half, they did not let the opponent score a goal, which made the Fifen players look very happy when they left the court. You need to concentrate in the second half, do you understand? The terrain will change a lot in the second half, and this cannot be achieved by preparation alone. It can only rely on your reaction, courage, and wisdom. Zhu Shan did not smile after returning to the locker room. Instead, he spoke to all the players, and then he turned to Zheng Qi. And you, Zheng Qi, in the second half of the game, on-the-spot command will be very important. Most of the time I don't have time to command. It depends on you and Qi to adapt to the situation during the game. Zheng Qi and Qi nodded at the same time. Qi had no objection to Zheng Qi being the main player. Although his tactical ability was also very strong, most of the time he relied on instinct, so it made people feel that it was like metaphysics. Zheng Qi was able to command and arrange tactics in time. On the court, Zheng Qi was the core of the command. Our situation is a little bit serious now. Fu King said helplessly in the locker room of Corning. In the first half of the game, Corning's players played very well and worked very hard. They did not suffer much in terms of tactics. However, Zheng Qi's several targeted tactics made Fifen gain a 2-goal advantage. Even in the football era, a 2-goal advantage is an extremely huge advantage. In the chaotic field in the second half, it is not impossible to make up for the 2-goal gap, but it is a bit too dependent on luck. Of course, even before relying on luck, you have to perform well. There is nothing much to say about the second half of the game. The terrain can change at any time. We have some advantages in this regard because most of our players have better experience and performance than their players. Take the opportunity to score goals. Don't be anxious. Just pretend that we are not behind. Do you understand? Play one ball at a time. Our current situation is not very good, but if we start to be anxious, then we will not have any chance of winning. The players of Corning nodded one after another. They knew the current situation. In the league, although Corning has achieved good results, they have already locked at 4th place in advance and they can be said to have no desires. There are no chances to play against strong teams in the next few rounds. The only strong team is Southland, but with Southland's current ranking, there'll not be too many Poland in that game, and there is really nothing to lead in the next game. In this case, Corning's mission in the league can be said to have ended early. Next, they can use the game to train newcomers. What they really want to pursue is only the cup game. Then even if the situation is worse, they must work hard in the second half and exert all the remaining strength of this season. In short, this is the only game they can pursue this season. This is a very important factor. That's why Li Qing's felt that it was almost the entire league that was out to deal with Fifan. Maybe he didn't have such a mindset, but the schedule arrangement formed a situation where, in addition to Fifan, the three teams with the best performance this year in the league were out to suppress Fifan. In the league, it was Team Head, and in the cup, it was first Canning and then Changfeng. These opponents were teams that would not give up until the last moment. Even if they would lose to Fifan, they would make it difficult for Fifan to win through their efforts and struggle. And such a schedule also put a lot of pressure on smart people like Li Qing's. After all, in such a situation, if Fifan couldn't be stopped, then it would be a huge blow to Li Qing's self-confidence. Although he was already a veteran and would not be affected too much, he needed to maintain stronger self-confidence if he wanted to be strong and healthy. The second half began, and both sides began to play. At this moment, the map had changed a little. The background pattern that was originally blue sky and white clouds had gradually turned blood red, which was the color of the fire. Starting from the second half, the ground will be randomly burned by flames. If the players fail to dodge in time, they will be engulfed by the flames. The lethality of such flames is very huge. Therefore, in addition to luck, such maps also rely on reaction. The more experienced the players are, the less panic they will be in such situations, and the greater the possibility of escaping danger. Corning's players will not have any problems in this regard, while Fifan's players will suffer a little loss. Of course, no matter how calm you are, you can't definitely escape danger. Even if you escape danger, you may crash into the opponent's formation. In such a situation, more often, it's a matter of luck. But Corning can only rely on luck now. In short, they are already 2 goals behind. How can they not fight again? Yuan Shao and other core players are already prepared. In the second half, they will be on the court all the time, putting Fifan under more pressure. With this mentality, the second half of the game is destined to be a fierce competition between the two sides. Compared with Corning's core players who have been on the court all the time, Fifan seems to be more calm. Their core players still take turns to play and rest. But this is normal. Can9 only has this one game to play, so of course they will fight as hard as they can. Their core players will just have to rest well. Overdrawing in one game will not cause any problems for the players. As for Fifan, after this game, there are still many games to go. If they don't rotate well, they will collapse before the start of the China Cup final. What kind of game will they play? This is also why Fifan tried his best to gain a 2-goal lead in the first half. If he didn't do this, he might suffer too much in the second half. After the second half started, Can9 immediately launched a fierce attack. Because of the venue, they soon discovered that Fifan did not send many main players in defensa. Only Liu Shibo and Zheng Qi appeared in the core, and only Zheng Qi and Wang Yuanfen appeared in the main force. Wang Yuanfen was ready to counter-attack, and Zheng Qi was responsible for using a wide range of skills to contain the opponent. The others who appeared were basically substitutes. Can9 did not waste time, but launched a fierce attack at the first time, not to give Fifan a chance to breathe. They want to drag us down. These goals from Canning are really fierce. Bin Shikai on the bench couldn't help but sigh. Because we can't throw everything in this game, they can see this clearly, so of course they know what to do now. Shen Ruofei said coldly, but it doesn't matter, we can hold on. Zhu Shan said. Zhu Shan's confidence in Fifan certainly didn't come for nothing. Although there are many Fifan substitutes on the field now, they can fully play out their attribute points in defensa. With their attributes, even if they're standing still to output, they can play quite well. They are a little worse in terms of operation level, but that is also the level they play in fierce confrontation, and such standing still output will not have any problems. Think about it, how much damage can a god-level player who stands still to output, with his attribute advantage, cause? At least no player in Canning can ignore this kind of damage. Under such resistance, it is indeed quite difficult for Canning to form an attack. Aren't they afraid of being killed by the change of terrain? The players of Corning were all thinking in their hearts, but soon they understood why Fifan did this. After the start of the second half, the terrain would change randomly, but the frequency was not high at the beginning, that is, randomly attacking the places where 1 or 2 players from both sides were. Even if a few players died, the output of others would not be affected, and Fifan's defensa would not have any problems. Their main force and core will pay attention to the changes in the ground.
In this case, Fifen can do better and consume more fighting spirit and energy of Corning players. No matter how tenacious the Corning players are, they can only do better when they are full of energy. The current situation can only cause more obstacles to Corning players. Roam around, don't force the attack, wait until they have a vacancy before forcefully attacking. Yuan Shao said decisively in the team channel that it was obviously unwise to forcefully attack the standing output of 10 god-level players. Such an attack would often cause our side to bear more damage. Once the auxiliary can't recover, the opponent may counterattack and cause you extremely serious damage. In the case of light damage, the ball may be refreshed, and in the case of heavy damage, the opponent may grab the ball and then counterattack. By roaming, you can avoid the opponent's output, and then when the field changes, most of the opponent will not be able to avoid the attack. In this way, the formation will be flawed, and then it will be a good opportunity to attack. The stupid practice of standing output has basically been abandoned by various clubs long ago, because such output, seemingly invincible, actually has many places to use. Extraordinary players all have extremely excellent attributes, which allows them to make up for one defect of this simple tactic, but the other defect of lack of mobility is often more fatal on such a map. Chapter 875. Expanding advantages. In the second half of the Red Cliff map, the change is that fireworks may suddenly appear at any position where the two sides stand, and then surround the players. At the beginning, there are 2 places, one for each side, and then 2 more places will be added every 3 minutes until it reaches 10. That is to say, after 15 minutes, the number of fireworks that appear on the ground each time will be 10, surrounding the 10 players in the middle, with 5 times on each side. In the last 15 minutes, the number and quantity of the flames will be completely random, sometimes hovering between 4 and 12. When the terrain changes, it will not be evenly distributed between the 2 sides, but there may be fireworks in 4 places, one side will be hit 3 times, and the opponent will only be hit once. At this time, of course, the opponent can take advantage of the opportunity. So in the beginning, the experience and reaction of both sides are tested. In the last 15 minutes, in addition to testing these 2 points, the luck of both sides must also be tested. If 10 fireworks appear at the feet of the opponent's players at the same time, and our side does not have even one, then this wave of advantage alone is enough for them to get a ball. Although such extreme situations rarely occur, they are not impossible. Even if they lose the game because of such factors, many people can only think that they're unlucky and cannot say anything else. Of course, such situations rarely occur in important games, let alone in a stalemate. Now Yuan Shao is going to take advantage of the next flames that appear. There are signs, and there will be time for you to dodge, but this time is very short, and the direction and position of dodge are also very particular. To make such a judgment in a short time is indeed a test of the players' reactions and experience. For Corning, their players are all in motion, so it is of course much easier to dodge, while Fifen's players are standing still, and if they're a little slower, they will be engulfed by the fireworks. This is Corning's opportunity. Obviously, Yuan Shao's tactical thinking is not a problem at all. In the overall confrontation, one side is missing a person, which is a very difficult loss to make up for, and it is also an opportunity that Corning's players can use. Even if they cannot directly defeat the opponent's defensor, at least they can make Fifen's defensive formation retreat a long distance, forming a situation of gradual suppression. As long as the opponent's activity space can be compressed, it will be easier to break through the opponent's defensor. Corning is waiting for such an opportunity, breaking through the defense of Fifen in one fell swoop, and then narrowing the score gap. This is the only thing they want to do now. Of course, they don't need to wait too long for such an opportunity. 2 fireworks will be added in 3 minutes, but it does not mean that there will only be one such opportunity in 3 minutes, but it will appear several times randomly. The number and interval time are all random, otherwise, it will not have such a big impact on the game. After waiting for dozens of seconds, Corning's opportunity came. Fireworks appeared under the feet of a Corning player, and she quickly retreated and avoided the coverage of the fireworks. At the same time, Jin, who was covered by the fireworks, only had time to throw out all the skills he could throw, and then was taken away by the fireworks and turned into light and left the field. The lethality of fireworks is very strong. If it is not strong, it will not have a huge impact on the game. When Jim turned into light, most of the players of Corning had gathered together and rushed to that position. If the fireworks on the floor did not kill a player, they would continue to burn for more than 10 seconds, but if they did, they would disappear immediately. Such a gap could be used. Anai Lily took the lead. Although she had a delicate name, she was the sharpest knife of Corning, armed with weapons and charging forward. Following closely behind were 4 players of Corning. What they had to do was to constantly expand the mistakes of the opponent's defense line. Once the extraordinary players started to move, it would be difficult for them to be their opponents. At the time, they would be able to suppress the opponent to their own goal. If the opponent did not retreat as a whole, then they could directly cut into the opponent's goal. At the time, even if the opponent killed many of their own players, it would be meaningless, as long as they could score a goal. With most of the players standing still to output, could Extraordinary have such a quick reaction? No, this was something that Corning was very sure of. And Lily rushed forward first. She was guarded by someone and was not hindered by anything. Instead, she continued to attack and move forward. As a pioneer, of course, she needed to move forward without hesitation. She rushed forward for more than 100 yards before someone stopped her. Liu Xiaobo. And Lily was of course very clear about Liu Xiaobo's level. She knew that Liu Xiaobo was an excellent defensive player, but at this time, what could one person do? There were 2 teammates who followed her. 3 against 1, even a god-level player could not stand it for long. So Lily did not waste any time and quickly launched an attack. She knew that behind that 3 of them, the auxiliary corps also followed with the ball. The other extraordinary players did not return to defensa so quickly. As long as they broke through Liu Xiaobo's defensa, they could directly attack the extraordinary gate. However, Liu Xiaobo showed his top level. Under the impact of the 3 opponents, he stopped the opponent for a full 5 seconds. This period of time is enough to do a lot of things. The Fifen players who were standing still began to pour out their firepower and attack the other players of Canning. The Canning players who wanted to rush after Lily and others were constantly interrupted by the control skills thrown by Zheng Qi. In the case of being frozen in place, although it was only long-range damage, it also brought huge damage to the other players of Canning who kept blocking the Fifen players. After these standing players and Zheng Qi's skills held back most of the players of Canning, Zheng Qi and Wang Yuanfen appeared behind Lily and others. Liu Xiaobo was almost at the bottom of his health at this time, but he was still able to hold the opponent well. Lily and the other 2 attacked too fiercely just now, and there was no possibility of getting out. They have been prepared, Fu King muttered helplessly. This could not be a contingency. Obviously, in the case of standing output, Fifen had prepared a set of very effective tactics to play such a good role. Tactical output, a tactic that has been abandoned by most teams, can have a very good effect when used by Fifen. Their players' attributes are all excellent, which makes their output more powerful. The possible flaws caused by the inconvenience of movement can also be made up by their outstanding players. At least at this stage, the departure of 1 or 2 players will not cause much hindrance to their defensa. When you want to seize such an opportunity to launch an assault, you only need a short obstacle to surround you and form an annihilation trend. They have made good use of their attribute advantages. It is difficult for us to resist. Lily, who left the field helplessly, couldn't help but say something. Although she is the best player in Corning's charge ability, she is not reckless at all. On the contrary, she is quite careful and her tactical level is not bad. So she soon realized a frustrating fact. It's a bit helpless, but we still have to fight. Maybe there will be hope after fighting. Fu King nodded and said. For this, the other players of Corning did not think there was anything wrong. After all, professional games are like this. Not every time you can have the right tactics to fight against your opponent. Many times, you can only watch and fight. As you fight, hope comes out. On the field, Fifen successfully annihilated most of Corning's players again. While grabbing the ball, he started a counter-attack and suppressed Corning in his own half. Fifen's fans shouted wildly. In the second half, Fifen could expand the lead to 3 goals, which is really a huge lead. Even if the field in the second half will become more complicated, with such a big lead, the next game will be more comfortable. The fans all know this truth, and Fifen certainly cannot be unaware of it. In the process of suppression, they gradually completed the substitutions. Shinrao Fei, Bin Shikai and other core players all came on the field, ready to forcibly tear open the opponent's defense line. Corning's players were resisting Fifen's attack, but they were suppressed by Fifen in front of their own goal. Their space for activities was extremely narrow. On such a map, being suppressed was almost equal to being unable to resist. Fifen didn't need to attack fiercely. They just needed to suppress Corning continuously, and then when the terrain changed, they could use the advantage of numbers at that moment to launch an attack, which was enough to have a good effect. That's what they did. After the flames appeared on the floor, Fifen immediately launched an attack.
The large-scale skills and control skills almost covered Corning's entire defense line at the same time, and then Fifin's players began to forcefully attack, and with the lethality brought by the fireworks, they defeated Corning's defense line in one breath. Attack and defense are like this. Maybe there was a stalemate for a long time at the beginning, but when it comes to close combat, the victory or defeat is often decided in an instant. This is the case now. After the defense line was defeated, Fifin drove straight in and scored a goal. 5-2, they expanded their lead to 3 goals. Fin DS capture no much as great as Pelaga hasta el final. No se olviden de dull like busgasms contenido exclusivo ixo inmediato. Se escravata news teropatrian. Recuerda, carda like, se escripsino donaking nos anima a continue. Great as a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.